And we're glad to have everyone here this evening. Welcome, Jenny. We have a number of staff members who are joining us tonight, and it looks as though we have a number of participants who are joining us from the public. So we welcome all of you this evening. And we're going to start with our board and commission interviews. And Paul Bars is here, and Paul is interviewing for the Sustainability Commission. And Paul, what we ask you to do is just tell us why you've applied to the Sustainability Commission, what you think you'll bring to the table.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I'm applying for the position. I heard about the commission through a current member, Jeff Tomich, who's a parent at Avery that I know through various activities. I have a third grader there. I'm very interested in issues, particularly cycling, pedestrian issues, recycling, that kind of thing. I think that I can bring something to the commission. I'm an attorney by trade. I'm currently with Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, doing utility and housing advocacy. Before that, I was with Brian Cave as an antitrust lawyer, done a few other things in practice, both here in St. Louis and in other places in Toronto and Los Angeles. I'm originally from the UK, but I actually moved to St. Louis as a teenager when my dad took a job here. So I was here for 3 or 4 years back in the 90s and then left, and I've been back here with my family since 2016 and in Webster since the end of 2016.
Great. Good. Does anyone have a question for Paul? Well, it sounds like you have a lot of interest in and nice background for this commission, and we will let you know by the end of the meeting tonight how this goes.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank you
Paul.
very much.
Thank you for your interest, and we're glad to have you in Webster Groves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to review the regular agenda. Is there anything on there that needs to be discussed at this point? If not, then we will go on to the mayor city council updates. And I usually do this in alphabetical order. What if I reverse the order tonight? And so we start with Emerson Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no updates tonight.
Okay, Sarah Richardson.
Sure. We had a Parks and Rec meeting last week. We had a good meeting, lots of public input on some ideas for a potential new park, which I don't want to steal any thunder on, but there was some exciting discussion there. Yeah, that was, I think, maybe our biggest highlight there. So we talked quite a bit about what the pool will look like when it opens, and that it is scheduled to be open, and kind of how other activities will be impacted by COVID regulations and restrictions by the county. But we're in good shape to have quite a bit open and happening this summer in Parks and Rec.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. David Franklin.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Laura Arnold. No, Pam Bliss. I'm working my way backwards.
Hi. So this is the first of the month, and I had both of my commission meetings last night. The first one was for the Green Space Advisory Commission. We had an Arbor Day recap, which was last week, and I wanted to thank those of you who attended. They declared it one of the most successful Arbor Day meetings, and a big thanks to the Department of Parks and Recreation and Yvonne, who really were instrumental in getting that all together. We had a discussion about the parade on July 3rd, and the commission has historically had award-winning floats, and they've decided this is going to be one of those years where they're going to try again. So they've decided to participate in the parade and discussed possibly partnering with another commission if anybody would like to join them. We talked about several projects, but one that stands out right now is they've been working on McKee Park, which is located at the corner of Hamel and Foot. And they've been doing a lot of planting and cleanup. And they've also talked about maybe painting the pavement with some hopscotch or some other games there for anybody, not just kids. Met last week hearings. The first one was a CUP for called the Woe in Webster. It's North Gore and is essentially in Rolling Ridges buildings. And so it's going to be an event space for smaller daytime events and evening events, anywhere from yoga classes to luncheons or small receptions. And that was passed. Then the second public hearing was for the zoning code text amendments for multifamily dwelling regulations. The purpose of this, one overarching reason, is to clean up the dimensional requirements in commercial districts. This excludes student housing, and multifamily dwellings are only allowed in commercial districts. So, and it will not go into existing residential areas. The 1978 comprehensive plan and the development partnership foundation plan in 06 called for multifamily housing for walkability and to keep residents from moving away while they search for homes that are smaller or offer more convenient living. These long-range use maps were adopted by the city. There was a presentation about why now, and some interesting data was given by Danny. One was comparing 1970 to 2019 population. It has gone down by nearly 5,000 residents. That's 16.5% loss. Another reason for going to multifamily dwelling is to increase the diversity of building stock and tax base that will help the community weather unforeseen events such as COVID. Another benefit is that more residents will be spending money in Webster Groves, and it's calculated that an extra $1,200 will be spent at local business and restaurants per household each year. There are going to be, all the standards are going to be remaining high. They discussed performance standards, which we updated for lighting, noise, and impervious surfaces a year or two ago. When the presentation concluded, they all agreed this was a lot of information, so the hearing is going to remain open to the June meeting. Due to the complexity of all the subject matter, I would encourage everybody to listen to the next Plan Commission meeting. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Laura Arnold.
Thank you, Mayor. The BDC met. Unfortunately, I did not attend, but I know they're continuing to work on coordinating across business districts for their activities. I think next week or next month, they're going to try and come to some conclusions. No, we're in next month. This month, they're going to try and come to some conclusions for recommendations to us. The Sustainability Commission sent a letter to me that I'm going to send to all of you. They would like us to consider mayors for clean energy. I know we've talked about this before, but they have some very specific rationale and reasons that they'd like for us to do that. And so I will forward that along, and then hopefully we can get that on a work session agenda sometime in the not too distant future. I know we're jam-packed. And then also I found out just like an hour ago that apparently in the state of Missouri, it's local government week.
Yes.
So I just wanted to take my moment to say thank you to all of the people who work so hard in local government in Webster Groves. So that's my little plug for that. And that's all. Thank you.
Thanks. Karen?
My only meeting since our last meeting was with the library board. Not a lot to really report. Just the one thing that I just wanted to, they mentioned with the library opening and starting to open it again for use, for people to come in or to use it. I mean, like groups or things of that nature. And they're gonna continue following the county health department's guidance which would require people in attendance to wear masks. And but whatever they do and however they continue to open going forward, they're going to make sure that they're in step with the St. Louis County Health Department guidelines.
Thank you. All right, before I go to staff and Maria, I just want to update you on a couple of board and commission meetings that I've been to too. The Police Community Engagement Board met. They reviewed the meeting that we had with Webster University students. And there were some recommendations for trying to coordinate better with the Webster University students. And we talked about how difficult that's been with COVID, but we're hoping that we can resume some of that. They're setting a retreat. The PCEB members will meet with a retreat. And we talked about the survey that they've spent so long putting together that's really great, and about how to get it out. The Arts Commission met this morning, and there's a wonderful concert being planned for July 17th called Baroque Under the Bur Oak. And Walter and Margot Parks are leading that, and they are bringing in on their charge, they're bringing in some incredible musicians who will be here for that. That's going to be a really great event. And as more comes, as we develop more, I'll pass that on with you. And finally, we're doing Mayors for Meals this Saturday from 9 until noon in the front of City Hall. And anybody who wants to come and help, you're welcome to do that. And certainly anybody who wants to come and add something to the food barrels, we would appreciate that. So I'm going to pass this on to Neil. Is there anything you have that you want to add?
Just briefly, if I may, I was at the same meeting last night that Pam was at. And of course, it was the planning and zoning meeting. And regarding the issues that are before us tonight and that were there last night, there have been people who have been saying that these meetings are somehow being held in secret. This is all being done just like we're doing this meeting. They've been publicized, they've been broadcast, they're on our website, and they are open to the public. Now, we had a handful of people that were there last night and were interested in what was going on. But I do think it's interesting to note that there are folk who somehow think that we operate under a shroud, which is simply not true. And these things are left open for a very long period of time so that we can maximize the amount of public input, just like we do with our council meetings. Make sure that it's publicized, make sure people understand what's going on. People only have to turn on their computers to attend these things and hear what's going on. So again, I point that out because in tonight's remarks, having read them, there will be a lot of comments about people who somehow think that we're operating in secret, which nothing could be further from the truth. So I point that out because our boards and commissions work very hard, and they work very hard to be transparent. And I think that particularly in light of the fact that it is Small Government Week, I think that it's important to note what they do. And they do this without pay. They do it without compensation. And they do it for the community that they live in. And again, I think that that's very important to recognize as well. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marie, if you have something, and then you and I can talk about the redevelopment proposals.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, my comments dovetail into Neil's, and it's regarding communication. There does seem to be a discord right now from certain community members regarding transparency. And we've received a lot of phone calls, emails, other various communications, which is terrific. We want to encourage that. We want communication and input from the public on everything City Hall. However, there's been several that have an unfriendly discourse and are just downright rude, quite frankly. And I would like to remind the public that we are civil servants and that the people who answer the phones are simply doing their jobs. And so we, again, welcome public input, but we expect courteous treatment of all of our staff at all times and nothing less than that. So a plug to please be kind to one another and to city staff. And aside from that, a quick update on the carnival, which probably people have already seen updates on. And I saw that we had Scott, so if I say anything incorrect, Scott can get me on track. But the Lions Club has submitted the their plans to the county. I believe they did that late last week, perhaps on Friday. I don't know a timeline of when the county will respond, but that really is the first and largest hurdle to get past as we figure out the carnival events. They did also submit their special activities permit to the city last week as well, and so city staff have started on that. However, the county will supersede anything that is done. So we're all working hard on that. And that's all I had, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Well, Marie and I also wanted to talk about some updates with the redevelopment project. You know, we've been fairly quiet about the redevelopment project because we haven't had much to share, but we're starting now to get new information. We're starting on some processes, and we are going to work hard at making sure that the public is looped in as we receive this information and as we have to go through some decision-making steps. So this is beginning to gear up, and we are going to make sure that the public knows exactly where we are. We've received some preliminary financial information. We have a draft. We will work to make that into a more final document, and then it will be shared with the public. And Marie, do you want to add to that?
You know, that really summed it up well, Mayor. We did finally receive the long-awaited cost-benefit analysis, and just a reminder to the public that it was delayed for many reasons, all COVID-related, just difficulty getting data from whether it be the county, because of course they had a health focus right now and all hands were on deck elsewhere. But for whatever the reasons were, it has been delayed. It has been finally received. And it's a lot to wade through. And so we are beginning to wade through that. It will, of course, be shared with the public. We also will be trying to figure out, and hopefully now that people are being vaccinated and we can start to gather at least in smaller groups, you know, trying to figure out how we can have some in-person public commentary as well as town halls where we do surveys. But we will have a multitude of ways to get public commentary and to share the information. And I know everybody here knows this, but I'll say it again, that council has not made a decision on how to move forward, because there seems to be the perception that perhaps it's been decided, and it hasn't been. The information is now finally here, and so we'll start wading through those processes. So thank you.
And in the meantime, keep your comments coming in a kind manner, but keep your comments coming. There is a form on the city website that you can fill out, and all those comments are shared with the council members. So thank you. Great. Anything else? All right, then we're going to move on to our topics. And our first topic tonight is a recommendation to cancel the July 20th council meeting. Katie, can you give us a background as to why that date was chosen?
That was kind of the best date for some of the staff. So we went with that one, but we're amenable to whatever the council's feeling as well.
Well, does council have any objection to canceling the July 20th meeting? No. For the public that's listening, every head is shaking no. So we will go with taking the July 20th meeting out. And in the meantime, if there's something the council needs to deal with, we certainly will gather together and do that. All right, topic one is okay. Our next topic has to do with a building infrastructure update, and I'm going to throw that back to Marie and staff.
Yes, thank you. So Mayor and Council, we've got Todd Regg here with us this evening, who is the Director of Public Works. And so this is kind of a continuation of the budget discussions that we've had. While we're talking about facilities, it fits in because facilities cost. And while we have enjoyed good revenues previously, some of that and good reserves has been done at the cost of deferred maintenance. And unfortunately, that deferred maintenance is coming due now, which is not an ideal time. And so Todd is going to go through a presentation and can answer any questions that you have. So Todd, thanks for being here.
Sure. I'm going to try to do this, share my screen. I don't know. I've never done this before.
Huh.
Okay, is that working?
Yes, good.
Okay. So as Dr. People said, she wanted me to come to the council at a work session to talk about our maintenance needs with our buildings that have been put on the back burner, and they're starting to rear their ugly heads. The biggest one with City Hall is the HVAC. A couple weeks ago, our AC went out at City Hall, at Firehouse 1, at Firehouse 2, which is a separate building, and the IT server room where all the servers are at. So we had 4 air conditioning units that went out at once in 1 week, and we were scrambling to get it up and running. We had to put a complete new unit in the server room for $17,000. And we got Firehouse 2 up and running. We got Firehouse 1 up and running. And then it took a couple days and we got City Hall up and running. So with that being said, City Hall was originally built in 1931. It had a renovation that was done in 2001. But at that time, it was just a renovation of the office spaces. There was nothing done mechanically to any of the HVAC units at that time. Coming in 2015, the chiller unit, which is the big unit that's down on the side of the building down here in the fenced in area, that was replaced. We've had some issues with it ever since it's been replaced, having to have maintenance done on it almost yearly. The air handling units, AHU units, were recommissioned in 2017. I don't know if any of you remember that. All that was they hooked up computers to them, reprogrammed them, and they were supposed to run better, but I don't think they've been running like they're supposed to. The fire department unit, AC unit, was replaced in 2011. That's the one that went out a couple weeks ago, and we got that repaired and up and running, so that's all good. So if we're looking at replacing the entire HVAC unit for the entire building here, which is City Hall, Police, and Firehouse 1, you're looking at approximately $1 million to do that. I have a company coming out next week that is going to start an evaluation on it for free. So we'll get their recommendations and hopefully some cost estimates at that time, and then I can pass it on to Dr. Peoples and she can share it with the council at that time. The service center is the other building that we maintain, where our street department works out of. It was originally built in 1968, and then they had a renovation in 2006. Now their HVAC unit was replaced in 2012, and we have not, knock on wood, had any issues with their unit. So they're in good shape. So other issues with the buildings include roof issues. So the City Hall has several different roof areas, a couple of flat roof areas, and then some peaked areas. The flat roof areas are in need of new coatings, urethane coatings that they put down. And that would cost us $75,000 to replace those. The asbestos roof, which is over the Firehouse 2 bunk area, or Firehouse 1 bunk area, which you can see out of the council chambers, that is falling apart. Some of the shingles have fallen out, so they're missing. So that's going to need to be replaced, and we got a recommendation to put up a 30-year metal roof for approximately $120,000. So it would be have a 30-year warranty on it. They can make it aesthetic to make it look like shingles, but it will be metal. That's their recommendation. Service center was also evaluated for roof, and they have a couple of flat roofs that also need new coatings, and that would be $160,000 for theirs. And then their roof that is under the solar panels needs to be replaced, and the cost for that is $225,000 because they have to remove the solar panels first, redo the roof, and then put the solar panels back. So that's why that cost is higher. Other things with the buildings are the tuck pointing issues, which is the brick mortar around the bricks. We have some areas where there's mortar missing, some areas where it's cracked and water can get in. So to tuck point the entire City Hall building would be $45,000. And then to do it down at the service center would be $40,500. And that also includes, then they put on a breathable membrane around that they spray it on, and that seals the brick, but it allows air to get in and out because the building has to breathe, is what they tell me. So
has any of this stuff been included in our budget over the past couple of years?
it has not.
Why is that?
Right.
Because we've only been doing maintenance on the HVAC, and we did not know that our roofs were getting to this point that we're going to need to have replacement. And we knew the tuck pointing was coming, but we didn't think it was that bad yet. So we had the assessment done here a couple weeks ago, and that's what they're coming back with, what needs to be done.
So who's in charge of maintenance at City Hall?
That would be the Public Works Department.
What of these items have to be done immediately?
They with the roofs, they put it out for 22, 23, and 24. So we could do it over a 3-year period. The HVAC, we've got it running right now at a pretty good, at the best optimal running rate that we've had it in a couple of years. So we're hoping that what has been done here recently is going to last a little longer than what has been done over the last couple of years.
So I guess I'm confused still. So in your mind, Todd, what needs to be done immediately?
Probably the roofs need to be addressed because we don't want to get water issues into the building.
What happened, a few years ago, I remember when I first got on council, there was a problem in council chamber.
Yes.
With the walls and everything. Was that related to the roofing?
Yes. And we got that corner repaired of the roof. And then we stripped the plaster and replastered it and repainted it.
So when we repaired that corner of the roof, did we not notice that the rest of the roof was falling apart?
No, because it was just a corner. It was where the gutter downspout is. The flashing had come loose there, and so the water was getting behind it and into the wall.
Was that contracted out, or was that done in house?
We contracted it. Yeah, we don't have.
Who did the contracting? I mean, who did the work? I'm sorry.
I don't remember who the roof company was.
I mean, I just question, like, couldn't they look over their right shoulder and see that the other roof was falling apart and notify us?
No, that's not. They were here just to fix that leaking area. So then I had this other company come out and do the assessment of all the roofs.
So, I mean, obviously this is all very important stuff for the structural integrity of our buildings, but I'm hopeful that in coming budgets that maintenance will be included with maintenance items like this will be included going forward.
So Councilman Franklin, they will be. Sorry, Mr. Egg, didn't mean to cut you off. They will be. One of the things that has really been pretty glaring to me is that the capital improvement plan is well done, but it doesn't include facilities and maintenance. When we look at the capital improvement plan and the budgets that you all have seen historically, that really refers to equipment and to vehicles. And maybe some large apparatus, your fire trucks, your ambulances, but it hasn't included updates of maintenance. And that is unfortunate because we are in one of the worst probably budget years that we've seen in our lifetimes, actually, maybe other than Great Recession. And we don't know how long the pandemic recovery will take. And even though some of the things can be pushed out a couple of years, and I think they can, it is not my intent to put them all in FY22, it's still going to be hard to catch up with. There's no way around it.
Todd, I got a couple of questions. Do we maintain some type of life expectancy spreadsheet on our equipment? I buy an air unit, it's supposed to last 15 years, and we know when we're coming up to that time frame, it might need replacing?
I'm not aware of that. I don't know if the previous directors had anything like that. I could ask around and see if my admin assistant knows if there's anything like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something that you might want to consider, that'll give you an idea if the life expectancy is coming close, that it needs to be replaced.
I agree.
Also, you mentioned that some of the replacing of the air units is going to be over 22, 23, 24. Is that correct?
No, that was the roofs, roof
The
replacement.
roof?
Yeah.
By spreading it out next 3 years, is there any danger in having more damage and just go ahead and replacing it?
The flat roofs, we would do the ones that are in worse shape, that the coating is peeling off and wearing off from the sun and that. Some of the flat roofs are in better shape than a couple of the other ones.
But they're in bad shape.
They're not in great shape.
Yeah. So I mean, just saying, if you fix one roof and the other one is not in great shape, something really could happen to the other roof. Would it be more feasible to fix them all at the same time?
I mean, if the council wants to appropriate that money, you know, I can do that. I can put the money in to do it all. I'll do all the flat roofs at one time.
Okay. Would you feel that would be more prudent than trying to wait until it breaks down or spring a leak and then have to backtrack and do it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, we would be, by doing it over a 3-year period, we do the flat roofs the first 2 years, and then we do the pitched roof the 3rd year.
Yeah. And also you mentioned about the area unit in the service center. I think it was 2012 it was, and it's working okay.
Yeah, we haven't had any issues with that one.
Yeah, but had that unit reached its maximum age of actually working?
Well, it's been 9 years, and usually AC units last 20, 25 years. So
Okay, so we're within the longevity for that unit that it'll
it's
work.
about half-life right now. So.
Half-life. Okay, great.
Thank you for that bit of good news.
You know, it seems to me, given all of the priorities that are out there and the needs that we have, it might be good to have some sort of facilities maintenance plan over the next few years. I think that's what Marie's getting at, is that we figure out what we need to do in the next few budget years so that we can actually, you know, figure out how to use our money wisely and what all the priorities are now. So
That is definitely key, Mayor. It's why I asked Mr. Reg to share some of this evening is because we've also been doing a fair amount of, I don't know if maintenance is the right term, but emergency fixes, because we've had to. The HVAC issues that he talked about, all the systems going out in 1 week, the server room that needing to be replaced, and you know, fortunately, those things have been able to come out of FY21, and they were able to. But I am leery of the ongoing maintenance, and so we do need to include those things in the capital improvement plan. I don't know that it needs to be a separate maintenance plan. We can certainly carve it out. But we definitely need to look at what our ongoing maintenance cost is, years of life for each of the items, and how we build a sustainable plan. And it's, I'm watching everybody's faces, and this is how I felt the first time he came to sit down with me. So there's a lot here.
Well, you know, it's really interesting listening to this, because these are not things that should be a surprise that are required for ongoing maintenance of the building and of the city and the administration of the city. I mean, the unfortunate thing is the blowback will be that this council and the new city manager blew through millions of dollars updating these buildings or making these updates, when these are things that I'm just really surprised weren't on some type of a schedule and included in the budget going forward. And now all we have to do, what we are tasked with, is playing catch up and putting a plan in so that this does not happen again in the future going forward to this magnitude.
And I'll add one more piece to that, and that is that whole front patio in front of City Hall is cracked and broken, and
Don't look up.
it's really in bad shape too.
You can't add any more. You can't.
That one's pretty awful.
They included that in the tuck pointing of City Hall.
Oh, good. Okay.
They noticed that, and I said, yeah, we've noticed that too. So.
Pretty bad. Okay, so I think what you're saying is that you've acquainted City Council now with all of these needs, all of the costs, and that as we think about our budget and we think about going forward, we have to add this into the mix.
We have to add this into the mix. As I shared in the last presentation, I think it was on April 20th, one of the things that you will be seeing, you won't be seeing it on May 11th as we're still waiting on prices to come in and doing all kinds of budget work, but you will start seeing in short order a 5-year plan for the budget that will build out maintenance needs, repairs, will build out employee salaries, and so that we can, it will be imperfect as forecasting always is, but you will have that. And so that will be a huge start. The other thing I want to note is with maybe a couple of things that Mr. Reg listed, I think the tuck pointing is an FY22 budget, and correct me if I'm wrong or if something else is in there, but the majority of those large expenses are not in what you've seen in the FY22 proposed budget, because we're trying to see where the plan will be. And quite frankly, it just is what it is for right now. We will start keep getting those numbers and information to you, but we will look at what those immediate needs are and where we go from there. So thank you. I know this was not a fun presentation, but it is a necessary one.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks Todd and Marie for this. All right, we're going on to our next item, which is the proposed amendments to Chapter 33, animals in regard to wild animals. Who is that dealing with these animals? Is that you, Neil?
Mayor, some lawyers get to go before the Supreme Court and other lawyers get to draft ordinances on wild animals. I am the wild animal lawyer that is here tonight. So there's two things I'm going to ask you to look at. Historically, the first one is Chapter 33 of our code deals with animals. Councilor Arnold had asked me to take a look at some provisions because we have a resident in Webster Groves who has a permit or is getting a permit with the Department of Conservation, which would allow her to treat and rehabilitate injured wild animals. Under our code, we don't allow it. And so I've been working on this actually for quite some period of time because I was trying to get a handle on what it was that the Department of Conservation actually required of someone who would have these permits. I wanted to understand whether there were any health issues, whether there were any safety issues, again, just whether there were greater rules and regulations that would control what you're keeping and how you're keeping it and that sort of thing. And I had a really hard time doing that because no one is at the Department of Conservation from what I can tell. So as I was working with Colleen Tilford, who is the resident, who's very nice, she'd sent me a copy of other permits that were out there. Finally, she said, well, Crestwood has an ordinance just like this. And so I looked at Crestwood's, and Crestwood has an ordinance very similar to our own. The only difference between Crestwood's ordinance and our own in Section 33 was that they had our provision, but they allowed for a zoological garden or center. Now, that's not exactly what we had here. So as I looked at this more and more and was getting no further with the Department of Conservation, I decided that brevity is the soul of wit, and I simply added to our existing ordinance a provision that made an exception that talked about someone who had this wildlife rehabilitation permit. And then I added this second paragraph that said, basically, I quoted the Code of State Regulations that controlled this and said, if you've met their needs, you will meet our needs, and we will create an exception to the wild animal prohibition that we have here in Webster Groves. There is a lot of oversight from what I can see, basically from Ms. Tilford. There is a lot that's involved. They do regulate the kinds of animals. They work in tandem with the Department of Health in St. Louis County and Animal Control in St. Louis County. They would pose no risk to the neighbors. There's a variety of things that they do to make sure that there could not be the spread of disease or anything like that. So I'm very comfortable with this very, very simple provision. I think it addresses what we would need to do in order to allow this very, very worthwhile process. So if you have an appetite for it, This would allow someone who has the Missouri Department of Conservation permit to rehab wild animals who've been injured, sick or injured. This would allow them to do that in Webster Groves. I anticipate we will have one, but that's okay. That's one. So questions can I answer for you in this regard?
Okay. Laura, did you
Hearing
have a
none.
question?
The second one, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Neil.
I was going to just mention, and Neil did it at the end. He did a great job of covering, as what I understand to be the program, but there's a very limited number of these permits by the state. So we wouldn't expect to have lots of people all of a sudden in our community doing this.
Yeah, and it's apparently it's a rigorous process from what has been shown to me, and I've again reviewed the application process and that sort of thing. It's something that's not lightly granted. So, and again, it serves a useful purpose.
What type of animals fall into this category?
Every permit is different, and you as the permittee actually sort of will define what it is you're going to do. But it could be possums, it could be raccoons, it could be bats, it could be birds. Again, it could be pumas or mountain lions if you're in the right place, but we're not. So again, we don't have to worry about that. But again, it's any type of wild animal, anything that is not a domesticated animal. But when you get your permit, they give you a very specific list of animals that you can treat. And you do that in tandem with the local conservation agent and the local, actually St. Louis County Department of Health.
And these are not full grown, right? These are.
Well, they could be, but it'd be a full grown bat or a full grown possum or something like that. But, they have caging requirements and all that sort of thing that they have to meet, all of which is done at the state level.
Anybody have any questions? Well, Neil, thank you for your work in this effort. I think we're all thinking this is not such a bad idea.
It was a challenge. Well, then the second thing, which is truly the fun thing, was Scott's provision, and Scott is on here somewhere regarding the temporary keeping of goats. Now, there is a proposition, again, if you have an appetite for it, that goats can be used for the purpose of dealing with invasive species. And so Scott, in his infinite wisdom, and like any good lawyer, did not reinvent the wheel. He copied ordinances from other cities like Knoxville, Tennessee, Hudson, Wisconsin, and Cottage Grove, Minnesota, that allow you to use goats in a contained area to deal with invasive plant species. So if you're trying to deal with whatever plant species you want to talk about, whether it's honeysuckle or something like that, you can fence the goats in, and the goats, like every good goat, will eat everything within that enclosure. And what Scott has put together is a proposal that would regulate how they're enclosed, how long they can be there, how often they can be utilized on a particular site, what cleanup has to look like, what permit costs are involved. It is a very green process. Doesn't allow us to keep goats in Webster Groves. They apparently are commuter goats when they come in. But these goats, again, have a very specific purpose. And again, it's solely for the purpose of eating up the invasive plants. They're there for a short period of time and they're removed. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about goats, but Scott's also on here too, and he's done the real research on goats.
And the goats do tuck pointing?
I was gonna say, will they leave the good grass and just eat the invasive species?
Scott?
So it depends on how many goats are in the enclosure and how much other materials there. They really like leafy greens. So they don't prefer turf grass. They would much prefer to eat winter creeper, small honeysuckle, not, when honeysuckle turns into a tree, they're not going to eat that. But the newly forming stuff they'll eat. They will eat your flowers or your hostas or anything like that if you have them out there. But this is a tool that we would like to use in the parks, along our nature sanctuaries, along our creek beds and things like that, where it's just one tool in our toolbox that we would be able to use, be a great mitigating practice. Year one, we go in and we cut down all the honeysuckle. As you know, that will regrow again year two. But when it's small and tiny year two, we could bring the goats in for a week and let them just gnaw all that stuff down, and it would be gone.
And you'll
So
be glad to know that there's a maximum number of goats per acre of 25 goats per acre, but that does not include the kits. That does not include the little goats. There's also a provision here that says if we do adopt an ordinance like this, we actually change the name of the Department of Parks and Recreation to Parks, Recreations, and Goat Herding.
that's not true.
So is this like, are we like part owners of the goats then, or are we just like renting them?
No, it would be a contracted service that we would be able to do, but this ordinance would also allow a resident to be able to partake in that. If they, if a resident lived against a creek bed or something, they would be able to hire a company to come in. That company's got to be responsive. They've got to be able to be back on site within an hour, and in the event of emergency, they maintain the goat herd. It can only be on there we can stipulate what window. My proposal says 14 days at a time and only 2 times per year per parcel. So it's not something that's going to be regular and ongoing. It would be a very niche market use.
Is it expensive?
It is fairly reasonable. We were going to do a trial run of an acre or so for about $400.
But David, none of these goats will be from Brentwood, just so you know.
It's a good thing to know.
So what do you need from us?
So if
You
I get a
do-
nod of your head on both, we'll put these ordinances in a workable form and we'll have them on the session, next session.
So is there anybody against this, or are we all going to do a thumbs up? I'm thumbs up on this. Anybody else? Yeah, you got everybody with a thumbs up on this, Scott and Neil. What an innovative idea. This is great. All right. Any questions?
Like I said, the Supreme Court's overrated.
Let's go for it. All right, our last discussion item is the Proposition 1 use tax, and I'm just going to throw this out for discussion purposes.
Well, Mayor, I know the last session I mentioned, I think we need to have a discussion on, what went right, what went wrong, what we could have done better, and suggestions of that nature. Just to make sure we stay clear communications to the community if we go back again for it. What is it that we can change to make the information a little bit clearer?
Any thoughts?
I have to say, I have really mixed feelings about this because I don't know, is this let's talk about what happened the last time, or is this a decision about whether to go in August or not? And those are obviously related conversations. I know we're under a time crunch to decide about August. Clearly, what we just heard again suggests that we really need the revenue that would come from this. But I'm uncomfortable going back to the residents unless there's some significant change. And to me, that means the legislature actually does what people think they're going to do. If we're going to go back soon, I guess that's what I'm saying. If we're going to go back really quickly, I think it has to be because something has changed about it, not simply because it didn't pass the last time.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to agree with Laura on that. It almost seems like we're starting to sound like the Missouri legislature here, where we want to overturn the will of the people in some regards. And why I think that this is a very important thing, and I think that it should pass. Nevertheless, whether it was because of our lack of or our inability to effectively communicate the purpose behind the use tax, or the voters just actually don't want it, I would say let's get our T's crossed and our I's dotted before we go back to the voters. And granted, why we need the money, evidently, based off of these maintenance requests, I think that making sure that it actually succeeds next times is the utmost important thing.
We will know also before the next meeting, I believe, what the state legislature is going to do. And because there are 2 things that will impact this. One is the Wayfair legislation, and the second piece is what they do about elections and when municipalities will be allowed to hold elections. And both of those things we we should know about pretty soon. So, yeah, I'm a little bit mixed too with this because people have said they don't want it, and yet was 13 votes, and even some of the criticism that is coming, the emails that I've had, it's pretty clear that people didn't understand. They just didn't understand. I mean, they think we put the $2,000 requirement there, and that's a state requirement, and it's so complicated that it was hard.
Yeah, and that's the purpose we're making a step to have our public relations person on board. Just to be the speaker for the council, make sure that information looks clean, clear, and if there's a specific purpose for those funds, and maybe we can outline what that might be, just so that it doesn't, they like the use of the money and go for it.
Yeah.
I also think when these initiatives are successful, they're often successful, I think, of the school district as well as the city, because there is a group of residents who have decided that they will advocate on behalf, right? We have a limited role to play once this goes to the ballot. And so I think it's important for, some of the people who are listening who supported it to think about, what might you like to do the next time this comes up, whenever that might be.
Yeah, good. All right, it sounds like do we have anything more to say about the use tax? I guess we'll just hold on and see where that takes us. All right, our next item is appointments to boards and commissions, and we have Paul Bars, who has applied for the Sustainability Commission. He seems like a really good candidate. What do you think? Yep, thumbs up on Paul Bars, and we will go ahead and appoint him to the Sustainability Commission. All right, we have a little bit of time before we go into regular session. Is there anything anyone needs to bring up, talk about?
Mayor, I would like to just talk about one thing briefly. Before the work session started, we were talking a little bit about Give STL Day, which is Thursday, May 6th. It's an online giving event. And this year, there are 41 nonprofit organizations from the 63119 area code participating, and that is a record number. I just wanted to remind everyone that these are the organizations who directly help and support our community members who are in need. And now there, as it was last year, there is a great need that still exists. I also wanted to let you know that Webster and Rock Hill is a very generous community, and we typically rank between 3rd and 5th of all the cities and the municipalities and counties in number of dollars raised and number of donations. So if anyone is feeling generous anytime between now and midnight on May 6th, you can go to givestlday.org and search 63119, and you will see all the organizations that are participating. Thank you.
And Pam, we're so proud of you because Pam has done all the graphics for May 6th for STL Give Day. And so you've done a great job on it again this year, and congratulations.
Thank you. Your worthy cause.
So. Right, well, let's take we have a 5-minute quick break that you can have. And Katie and Jen, how many remarks of visitors will we be hearing?
Very many.
Are we
We have
like,
not counted them, but there's a lot.
like 30 or so?
Oh, maybe double that and more.
Okay. All right, thank you. So take yourselves into we have 5 minutes, quick break, and then you'll come back and we'll go through those 30, 50, 60, 75 comments that we're going to hear this evening. Thank you. Thanks. Take a quick break. Katie, are you there?
I am here.
So we can continue on at this point?
Sure.
Okay. All right, I'd like to call our city council meeting to order this evening. And I want to welcome all of you who are here. Between the panel and the attendees, we do have about 35 people this evening, which is a hearty attendance. And we welcome everyone. We're glad that so many folks have tuned into Zoom tonight for this meeting. Those of you who have a comment at remarks of visitors, many of you sent your comment in to be read, and it came in before 4 o'clock today, and it will be read at remarks of visitors. And others who want to speak after that can raise their hand on the Zoom function, and if you haven't sent in a remark to be read and want to raise your hand, you may do so, and we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And so we'll start this evening with a roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Welch,
Here.
Councilmember Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss,
Here.
Councilmember Franklin,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
All right, our first agenda item tonight is remarks of visitors, and we have quite a few that will need to be read from by Katie and Jen. And so if you want to begin that process, let's go with it.
Yes, Mayor. Well, just one moment. Okay, we're going to start with a letter from the Alliance for Interracial Dignity. And I think Farrell Carfield has her hand up. Yes, she does. So I'm going to allow her to talk, to read her letter. There you go, Farrell. If you need to unmute, but there you go.
Thank you. Thank you. The Alliance for Interracial Dignity. Oh, first I should say I'm here representing our action team called the Culture of Inclusion and Housing Action Team. And I think, at least I know Clark Hoteling is also here tonight from that team, and others helped draft this statement. Thanks for listening, and I'll read quick. You have a busy night. The Alliance for Interracial Dignity fully supports the Webster Groves Planning and Development Department's current recommendations for text amendments to the zoning code. Contrary to false advertising in the April 23rd issue of the Webster Kirkwood Times claiming legislation is being rushed in secret, the two proposed amendments are part of a set of housing priorities City Council unanimously adopted in October 2019. The Alliance has followed along closely for years as city leaders have grappled with concrete steps to improve housing access, build a consciously inclusive community, and overcome decades of residential segregation. The proposed zoning changes can help slow the tide of smaller dated homes being replaced by outsized new construction. New structures will not now have to comply with reasonable floor area lot ratios, and unnecessary restrictions will be removed on the construction of duplex housing. Instead of McMansions, we could have two-family homes at a more accessible price point. All of the information about these changes has been made available in public meetings of the Plan Commission and City Council going back months according to the normal legislative process. We reject unsubstantiated scare tactics claiming property values will be damaged by improving the variety of housing stock available in town. Studies elsewhere show the opposite, and if Webster Groves property values can weather the Great Recession, it's hard to imagine much impact from a modest supply of duplexes. We believe that more housing options in Webster Groves will help to make our community more welcoming, more inclusive, and more diverse in every sense of those words, which brings a greater value for all of our community members. Thank you for listening.
All right. We're going to get started. In the interest of brevity, I'm not going to be reading the dates of these were all received. I'm just going to go straight into the emails, okay? This is from Daniel Berzini. Voters rejected the Prop 1 use tax on April 6th.
So why is the city council putting the Prop 1 use tax back on the ballot in a special election in August? The city council falsely claims voters were misinformed, yet the opposite was true. The city council spent $18,688.23 on the Prop 1 by educating voters with 100 yard signs, 4,484 postcards, a Prop 1 website, Webster Kirkwood Times ads, and a fair election. City council lost its proposed 13th special sales tax exactly because voters were educated. Voters do not need re-education, the city council does. Never in the history of Webster Groves have the residents had to re-vote on any of the 12 previous special tax propositions. If the city council wants to force a re-vote on Proposition 1 use tax immediately after an election it didn't like, I suggest the city council have a re-vote on all of the previous 12 propositions and special taxes too. The residents of Webster Groves are not ungenerous, as these 12 special taxes have already added to the cost of every purchase made in this city. No municipality has ever taxed its residents and businesses into prosperity. Why tax away the online sales advantage of our own neighborhood businesses? Giant online retailers such as Amazon lobby for local use taxes because it levels local businesses who simply can't compete with their one-stop shopping convenience and economy of scale. Homeowners and businesses are not the city council's cash ATM to redistribute tax money for pet projects or bail out the city council's inexcusable $2.4 million projected budget deficit. When it comes to our hard-earned money and our local Webster Groves businesses, there was no use for a 13th special use tax. Voters rejected the Proposition 1 use tax, and no means no. Listen to us, the voters. Don't insult our intelligence. Don't disenfranchise our voting system. Don't force us to keep paying to vote on the same Prop 1 tax increase until you get the result you want. Autumn constitutus, it has been decided. What kind of a government of, by, and for the people so disregards the will of its citizens? This is from James Cunningham. I generally vote against tax increases as a matter of personal policy, but the proposed use tax proposition in the April election was particularly easy to reject. The math didn't make sense. In a column by Mary Shapiro in the April 23rd Webster Kirkwood Times, Council member Emerson Smith was reported to say there was a lot of bad information out there about this issue. Here's an example. An estimated annual revenue gain of $250,000 at a tax rate of 1.5% would necessitate in excess of $16 million in out-of-state online purchases by citizens of the city. This amounts to $700 in sales for each man, woman, and child in the city. Given the threshold of $2,000 for the tax to apply would require the most of the 8,000 or so households in the city to qualify. Given the economic diversity of Webster Groves, I fail to see how these thresholds can be satisfied to substantiate the expected revenue. If, as Mr. Smith declared, this bad information can be corrected or explained, I will still not support a resubmitted proposal, but at least it may be able to understand the mathematics. This is from Alexandra Guillaume. Once again, I find myself writing to you to express my concerns on decisions you are about to make on behalf of Webster Groves residents. To learn you are planning to put Proposition 1 use tax up for a revote in August after it was voted against demonstrates a blatant disregard for those of us who fulfilled our civic responsibility for voting for or against it in the first place. As elected officials, it is your responsibility to enact the decisions of your community. The final vote on April 6th was against Proposition 1. While I understand you might not be pleased with the results, it is not for the council and mayor to conclude the legitimacy conclude the legitimacy of a revote based solely on the fact that it didn't pass. The result you should uphold is the one that residents in a fair democratic manner concluded at the ballot box. It's not so long ago this nation got beaten and bruised due to the results of a vote. I would hope that in the effort to maintain Webster's voting integrity and not fall into some level of hypocrisy, you will do the right thing and let the vote stand as it was concluded on April 6th. Gayla Hannon. As a resident of Webster Groves, I support this project. The concept is great and will provide economic growth to our community while upgrading the aesthetics of this area. The project needs to be self-supporting and the developer should not need financial support such as tax credits. From Ken Ann Smith. I am against the SG development plan. I live in the immediate neighborhood for over 23 years, and I've watched the green space flourish. The improvements to the parks, Shady Creek, we were on the right path, and now you want to ruin it with overdevelopment. I'm guessing none of the council members live in that neighborhood. We need total transparency and flesh and bones meetings, not Zooms, before this goes any further. I also oppose the A4 rezoning change. What are you people thinking? You're trying to ruin everything that makes Webster Groves desirable. Put it up for a vote in November. Dave Buck. In strategic planning, before you can plan forward, you should first evaluate and learn from where you have been. According to the city's organizational chart, Our mayor and city council report to the residents, which makes me one of your 23,000 bosses. Thus, in keeping with that responsibility, I am providing this resident's subjective, humble, and imperfect opinion of your performance against the 7 current council goals originally dated in 2018-19. Despite the impact of COVID, here's how I see where you have been and the important progress you have made. Goal 1, create a plan for a proactive approach to encourage and grow the commercial sector of the city. Grade A. Not aware of the creation of any new plan per se, but the restaurant scene in Webster grows is alive and booming. Plus, the redevelopment project was launched and promises big and bold future economic development. Goal 2, investigate options for increased parking in the 2 major business districts. Grade B. Certainly seems that options were investigated and enacted, like Bompart parking for Old Orchard businesses. While the need for new Old Webster parking dramatically decreased, the innovative and collaborative idea of using the Bristol Blacktop for after-hours additional parking revealed a new option if necessary. Goal 3, promote safe gun use and ownership by enacting legislatively acceptable municipal ordinance. Grade F. This is admittedly a very tough area, but except for a 1 afternoon training session in 3 years that I know of, there was nothing really done against this goal. Goal 4, to increase the opportunities for public engagement with council and staff. Grade B. Council and staff engage with the public very well in all written and circulated communications. There is a need for more face-to-face public engagement, such as more town hall meetings. Goal 5, explore additional housing options, such as multifamily housing and affordable housing. Grade B. Additional housing options have certainly been explored, such as community land trust, CLT homes. A4 rezoning proposal for 2-family residential and the workforce housing in the redevelopment project are concrete efforts against this goal. But gentrification in North Webster and the loss of many of our longtime Black residents have called for swifter decisive action. Goal 6, address and correct through ordinance changes housing issues that negatively affect Webster Groves homes and neighborhoods. Council eliminated the discriminatory source of income requirement for apartment tenants. Grade B. Goal 7, continue to promote the arts in Webster Groves through new funding sources for public art. Grade A. New funding sources made the City of Arts proud with the public art editions of the Ascension Bronze Monument in Barbary Park and the After Hours and Earth Rabbit sculptures. Overall grade B-. Very good performance, all factors considered, and the turbulent, unpredictable times you faced. One goal in particular lowered your overall grade. My advice for the future from the cheap seats is to focus on fewer goals, like only your top 3, but more tangible ideas and actions for each goal. In short, focus on doing only a few fundamental things, but doing them extraordinarily well. Maggie O'Toole, Old Webster Redevelopment Project is too much for such a small space. Destined for failure before it begins. We will be a laughing stock and the term Webster will never have the same connotation again. Please stop beating a dead horse. On net, more people does not always equate to more revenue. Long-term costs and consequences will be detrimental to this community. Please take a realistic long view of this. This proposed project should be scrapped. The planners do not have to live with the consequences, we do. Norma Ruffcar. I have been a property owner in Webster Grove since 2001. I live on Sherwood Drive in the A3 district. My neighborhood is surrounded by the A4 district. My understanding from the previous city council meeting notes is that Mara Perry stated, in keeping with the direction of the city council, these ordinance changes are designed to limit building bigger houses, as well as to limit the size of additions, so as to preserve the affordability and diversity of housing in Webster. I read and reread the Times article, and nowhere in the article is this information articulated. I find it odd and perhaps unsettling that the Webster Kirkwood Times seems to have neglected to fully show this information. This is clearly an important and informative point. Given the gravity of this change, it would seem appropriate for our elected officials to work with the media to ensure that important information is properly disseminated, especially during a pandemic. One might conclude that there exists an effort to keep certain information from becoming widely publicized so that a small vocal minority's agenda can be executed. Many people in the A4 district have worked very hard and saved to own their homes and pay their mortgages. They have a right to improve their homes. More importantly, they should have the right to enjoy the full economic benefits of their home upon the sale of that home. If this ordinance passes, the value of all homes in A4 will undeniably be adversely impacted. A first-year economics student can explain that any restriction on the use of good necessarily reduces its value. People who have worked hard and sacrificed to own their homes should not find that their home is worth less due to an agenda by a tone-deaf group of politicians agitated to action by the small, aggressive, and vocal minority. What will you say to the person who is hoping to use these funds from the sale of their home to fund their retirement, only to find that those funds will be considerably less than anticipated due to the actions of their city politicians? This ordinance, if changed, will directly affect all residents living in the A4 district, which is approximately 21% of all Webster Groves residents. Moreover, there are carryover effects to the rest of Webster Groves residents not living in the A4 district. That should be abundantly clear to anyone with a basic understanding of economics. At a bare minimum, a formal notice should be sent to each taxpaying resident telling them about the change. Lisa Mooney. I am a 15-year resident of Webster Groves, and I am deeply concerned with the A4 ordinance changes that are being considered. My husband and I were initially interested in living in Webster Groves because of its authentic charm, location, and income diversity. It is a real town. However, I don't believe it is the council's authority to limit existing homeowners in their pursuit of a nicer home or a higher price on the sale of their property in order to make it more affordable for future residents. It doesn't seem fair or equitable to those existing residents. I'm also concerned with allowing more duplexes in Webster Groves. If I'm reading your proposal correctly, the owner of a duplex does not have to live in the duplex. Experience has taught me that when the owner is not a resident and the renter has no ownership, respect and regard for the community is greatly diminished. I think the community of Webster Groves will suffer. I know I am not alone with my concerns as they pertain to these proposals. It is my hope that you will keep the best interests of current homeowners in Webster Groves in mind as you move forward. Carrie DiGregorio. My husband and I wanted to express our opposition to changing or easing the duplex construction rules. We relocated here 5 years ago and took a chance on a house that was above market value for our area. We made and continue to invest in Webster. We took the chance as we felt the homes that needed some work will draw young or older investors. Webster Groves has a charm that in today's throwaway society can't be retrieved. Single family homes in South Webster are not cookie cutter. I can't understand why you need this change. I don't know why all of Webster Groves was not included in the proposal. If it's such an urgent need, then include the entire residential areas. I look forward to this plan being defeated. Carl Valley. I'm opposed to the rezoning of any zoning rule or zone without a public hearing. The proposed zoning change is to be voted on by only secret closed door council meeting with 3 of the 6 council members not owning property in Webster Groves. I have lived in one of the proposed zones for greater than 25 years, paid very high property taxes, spent $220K 25 years ago. Now you want to dilute my property value without my voice. This zoning needs to be tabled and voted by actual residents. As promised, below you will find their addresses. 3 of them have no Webster Groves addresses. They are Laura Arnold, Sarah Richardson, and Emerson Smith. Am I reading this? Karen Anderson, 826 Holland, purchased property 2/1/2005, paid $65,000. Pam Bliss, 511 Oakwood, purchased property 5/25/10, paid $375. David Franklin, 223 East Jackson Road, purchased property 6/5/20, paid $252,500.
Come on, Laura and Emerson, you guys don't own property in Webster?
That's what the letter said.
Oh man, that's news to
Mr.
me.
Valley can come to my house anytime. I'll show him the deed that has my name on it.
There you go.
Gavin Ackerman, as homeowners in the A4 housing zone, we believe that any rezoning should be put to a vote by the community. We will push in our church and community to the voting. We will push in our church and community the voting out of any city councilor that takes away the vote of the people and our democratic populace to choose the future of the community. Steve and Michelle Heger. A4 rezoning change, Webster Groves redevelopment project. Who is benefiting from the proposed rezoning to allow for duplex housing? Not the current citizens of Webster Groves. I was under the opinion that mayor and council members were elected to represent the citizens of Webster Groves, not some outside unknown interest. Look around, the proposed development is not consistent with the Webster Groves we have enjoyed for many generations. Current zoning is meant to preserve the uniqueness of Webster Groves. How can you in good conscience vote in favor of rezoning? Katie Neeson Cook. I am writing regarding the zoning change for the A4 zoning district to allow for duplexes. An allowance for duplexes within A4 doesn't magically change all of A4 from single family homes into duplexes. The vast majority of A4 will remain single family properties because most of A4 is currently built upon. Gives the option that within A4, a duplex could be built in lieu of a new single family house that will not be priced at anything less than $800,000. We need diversity in our housing stock. In the current construction market, a new single family automatically means minimum $500,000 for the build. Take into account the land purchase, you're up to a minimum of $700,000. You can't build for less than that right now. If we are going to maintain options for young families, couples, etc., we need to have flexibility in what can be built, and that also means Webster Groves needs to be open to apartments, townhomes, etc. Jenny Fagan, dear City Council, I hope you think hard and fast about the A4 rezoning changes that you are considering. This should be put on the ballot to let people who live in Webster Groves voice their opinion. Seems as if the City of Webster Groves' mission is to build the biggest houses they possibly can to get the most taxes they can. It's sad to see how all single-family homes are being squeezed out, and you are trying to squeeze as many people into the small city as you possibly can. I am against this rezoning. Other builders in this area taking control, or do you as a city council have control? I would love to see the smaller single-family homes that are affordable made available to people wanting to move to Webster Groves, not duplexes and not mini mansions. Andy Herman. My name is Andy Herman. I have lived in Webster Groves continuously since 1950. When I was 6 months old, our family moved to Lake Avenue. My wife and I have raised our 3 daughters while living on Tuxedo Boulevard. My daughters attended our wonderful school. I've paid high taxes for over 40 years. I shop in Webster, Rogers Produce, Schnucks, James Carlton Insurance, Emos, First Bank, Webster Animal Hospital, and more. Please stop rezoning all A4 single-family housing to duplex housing. Betsy Zarumsky. Shocking and disappointing that the Webster Groves City Council has been secretly planning to turn our family city into a duplex city. A change of this magnitude should never be considered nor decided by 7 citizens of Webster Groves. Manipulating the lives of 23,000 citizens whose neighborhoods will be destroyed and home values will be depreciated will cause flight. Please don't vote the character of Webster Groves into extinction. Leland Curtis, your upcoming decision to rezone all A4 single-family housing to duplex housing is one which we strongly oppose. Such widespread rezoning affecting 69% of all single-family houses in Webster Groves is a radical proposal which should not be made solely by the City Council. At the very least, this is a proposition that should be submitted to the voters of Webster Groves at the next available election date. So I think you will find that it will be defeated overwhelmingly, and that will be your answer. Thank you for your service and careful consideration of this matter. Mary and Bill Newman. Our family opposes the A4 rezoning proposal. It would increase population density with less green space and falling property values. The high quality of life we have invested will be negatively affected. To be thorough and fair, we need more time and exposure to direct questions such as studies from other communities, projected final impact among the entire community, including private home ownership, business, and city services. What logic was applied in choosing the areas to be rezoned? Reported closed-door meetings is not appropriate. We moved to Webster Groves in 1962 as we knew what the community had to offer us and our family. Also, we know how Webster reached to the point of today, and it is not what A4 represents. A rezoning proposal of this magnitude must be put on the ballot for the entire community to decide, not by the council. Tess Thompson. As a 16-year resident of Webster Groves, I am pleased to see that Webster Groves City Council will be voting on a text amendment that will allow duplex housing to be built in many areas of the city, as per the original zoning for the A4 area. This proposal has the potential to add to the stock of affordable housing in our increasingly expensive city. I urge council members to vote yes on this amendment at their May 4th meeting. In the future, I also urge them to consider rezoning other areas of the city, including my own neighborhood, to allow for more affordable housing across Webster Groves. Linda and David Yates. We believe that the A4 rezoning proposal should be put to a vote by the residents of Webster Groves and not decided by the council. This is a decision that affects every household, our property values, and the very character of our city. The city council should be concerned with improving the lives of Webster residents and maintaining our property values, which will attract more people to our community. We also feel that the development along Kirkham Avenue would cause many more problems than it would solve. Traffic at Gore and Lockwood is already terrible when one is stopped for a train, and parking in the Old Webster district is bad at any time of the day. Increasing the density of population makes no sense at all unless there is a hidden agenda behind this proposal. Alex Horsfield, I'm respectfully asking you not to approve adjustment to South Webster housing. Being the father of 3 and a resident for over 25 years, I can confidently say this is not the right move. Please do not make changes. Until recently, our homes have been stable, pricing has increased, and schools have shifted zoning. Another adjustment to this environment will be more disruption than confidence. Our portion of the community does not need an additional housing or pressure. Please call if you would like to discuss further. Jim and Mary Struckle, regarding the A4 rezoning change, please put it up for a vote in November 2021. Wendell Dodson, please, the council and Mayor of Webster Groves, the choice of doing a whole scale vote to rezone, change all A4 to duplex housing is based on opinion as quoted below at the bottom of this email. It is a sad commentary that 69% of housing stock and associated property valuations can revolve around an opinion of a paid employee and not be put to a general vote for consideration, much less where's the data to propose such a change. The council is supposed to represent the community of Webster Groves. Here it appears the majority of the council are representing a developer's desire at 69% of the community's expense. Just because another community is doing something is not a sufficient reason to follow. Just because someone storms the Capitol, it does not mean we should follow or it is the correct thing to do. Where is the research and the data to support the choice presented below? Question for all, including Mara Perry. A small bite of what for who, and what is the actual benefit to the community? Quote, Director of Plans Mara Perry, who was directed by the council to make these A4 changes, defended the changes, saying that other cities have abolished all rules throughout their municipality and thinks it is a small bite. Perrin and Alice Stiefel, we are absolutely against the A4 rezoning proposal. It is imperative that current residents be involved in major decisions such as this that will have such a profound effect on their property values and the stability of their neighborhoods, more than 2/3 of which are in the proposed rezoning areas in Webster Groves. We want the A4 single family classification to remain as it is. We support a public vote on this matter. Mary Farner, how many city council members live in A4 housing zone? The proposal to allow duplex housing in the neighborhoods with the smallest lots is baffling and short-sighted. In many of these communities, residents already compete for limited parking spaces in the street close to their houses. Doubling the density of people and cars will only make it a difficult situation worse. An increase in the number of students in these neighborhoods will require increasing desks, classrooms, and teachers. Avery School has continually added structures, chipping away at the already skimpy green, blacktop, and wood chip space for students. The periodic flooding of Deer Creek and Shady Creek will only worsen with an increase in impervious surfaces from larger structures on smaller lots. Would the city council members vote for this proposal if duplex housing was allowed in their neighborhoods? Michael Slusher, I am disturbed by the recent decision by the city council to reclassify all A4 single family housing to allow for duplex housing. The subject has not been presented clearly to Webster Groves residents. More information is needed as to why and for what purpose. Why the rush? Put it on the ballot and do the work this time to inform the public. Mary and Bill Newman, our family opposes the A4 rezoning proposal. It would increase population density with less green space and falling values. The high quality of life we have invested will be negatively affected. To be thorough and fair, we need more time and exposure to direct questions such as studies from other communities, projected financial impact upon the entire community, including private home ownership, business and city services. I'm missing something here. Was applied in choosing the areas to be rezoned. Reported closed-door meetings were not appropriate. We moved to Webster Groves in 1962 as we knew what the community had to offer us and our family. Also, we know how Webster Groves reached the point of today, and it is not what A4 represents. A rezoning proposal of this magnitude must be put on the ballot for the entire community to decide, not by the council. Paul Mayer, as a resident of Webster Groves for 44 years, I feel that the proposal to rezone all A4 single family housing to duplex housing should not be determined by 4 council members and should be put to a vote by all of the residents of Webster Groves on the November ballot. I believe changing the zoning will result in changing the dynamics of the neighborhood by increasing the population, reducing property values, increasing parking, and reducing the safety of the neighborhood. If the city council truly represents all of the people of Webster Groves, you must decide on putting this rezoning issue on the ballot for a vote. JC Bates, I'm shocked you are trying to change zoning without the vote of your neighbors. I understand granting zoning variances on a case-by-case basis if they are agreed to by affected citizens, but to arbitrarily change zoning without all citizens voting on it is outrageous. Do not change zone A4 from single family to duplex without putting it to a vote of all citizens. Steve Braun, I'm writing to voice my fundamental opposition to A4 duplex rezoning. What I don't want but fear is happening in Webster is what I've seen happen in Kirkwood. You drive down a once familiar street and are shocked by how quickly and completely the entire character of a neighborhood was changed by poor development decisions. Keep Webster the community we know and love. Vote down this proposal. Linda Mcfarland. I and my husband are strongly opposed to the proposed rezoning of single-family housing to duplex housing in the A4 zone. Under the guidelines that you, the council, have listed as your visionary directions and goals, under protect community assets and infrastructure is the following. Make policies to preserve and protect the character, infrastructure, and assets of Webster Groves, including parks and green spaces. The rezoning of single-family housing in the A4 zone to duplex housing severely compromises the character of these areas and the quality of life in all the residents in these areas and the future value of their property. It does the opposite of preserving and protecting the current residents and the green spaces in these areas. It creates an uncertain future by the people affected without adequate input. You've exempted the larger lots, favoring the more expensive homes for no obvious reason. Is this fair? In this matter, the council isn't representing the majority of the residents who voted them in, but is working against them in their city. It creates a feeling of betrayal and suspicion of the city government and will mobilize people to vote for a council that they feel represents them. Joe Grasso. Hello, I would like to urge the council to vote no and not allow duplexes in the A4 zoning areas. My reason for this is the loss of property values here in Webster Groves. There is no need for this as the housing market is doing very well. I urge you to vote no on the zoning change. Seems there are some really questionable choices being made there concerning developments and increasing density. Let's not make the same mistakes over and over just to appease developers. The atrocious mistake made on the site of the YMCA, where you let a horrid brown box with zero character or design get slapped up across from the beautiful library, should serve as a beacon of the failure of the council every time you drive by it. Please do better here. Thomas Weaver. Concerning the proposal to make duplexes acceptable in the A4 zones of the city, I must express my extreme opposition to the proposal. The majority of citizens of Webster Groves were not born here, but chose to live here because they liked what they found here, and so, like myself, voted with their purchases and their mortgages and settled here. We deliberately chose neighborhoods of small to moderate sized single family homes and streets not jammed with parked cars to establish our homes, raise our families, and spend our lives. The proposals attempt to degrade the neighborhoods by raising the population density without giving the residents a chance to vote on the matter, and with no provision for compensation for the residents for the decreased quality of life that a higher density will bring, is nothing more than an attempt by the city to defraud the residents of the value of the investments that they have made in their homes and neighborhoods. Dan and Nancy Traum. Why is the A4 rezoning proposal not being put on the November ballot to be voted on by the citizens supporting Webster Groves? We had a home built in the past few years and we couldn't even have a 2-car garage in the front of our home because 40% of the homes in our block didn't have 2-car garages. Yet you are now going to take it upon yourselves to decide that the homeowners of A4 zoning want the rezoning that will only reduce the value of our property and double the number of citizens. Let the citizens decide. This should not be your decision to make. And why is it only affecting A4? Suppose if the other districts were included, it would be stopped immediately. Margie Dybel. Increasing the ultimate housing density in Webster Groves is a horrible idea and needs to be stopped. It will only harm the residents. Mike Mantia. In regards to the A4's district rezoning, how on earth does anyone believe this will help diversity inclusion, housing stock for middle or lower class, or help really anything at all? What is the benefit? The rental prices in this area are ridiculous right now, and honestly, always have been. You want developers and investors to take one overpriced house and knock it down to make a duplex, which potentially each unit would bring in more monthly than my mortgage, because a quick search of the rental prices in the A4 zone make it clear that this would be the case. The only benefit that I can see is adding more residents. There will be no increase in affordable housing. Also, sticking potentially double the amount of people in the same footprint that a single family allows will not only drive out your current residents, but will cause issues in the area of parking, traffic, noise, and would overall take from the quiet and peaceful atmosphere we have currently, which I might add is the only reason I pay the ridiculous taxes to live here in the first place. Richard Peterson. With a great deal of interest, I have been following the council's apparent intent to modify the current code of Webster Groves to expand the ability to construct 2-family dwellings and single-family attached dwellings in the A4 7,500 square foot residence district. Speaking as a former elected member of the Webster Grove City Council of 1981 to 1992, and as the owner of my home in the A4 district for the past 57 years, I feel that I have a few relevant comments to make regarding this matter. First, I must remind you that you have been elected at large to represent the best interests of all existing citizens of Webster Groves, not the interests of outside developers and those individuals who wish to relocate to Webster. I, among most others, established my home and raised my family in Webster because of its unique charm, great schools, and intense civic pride. What do we want? Why do we want to risk changing this inherent character of a large segment of our community to accommodate the desires of non-residents? Property values in Webster are at an all-time high. Why should those of us who have invested in this community risk a loss in the value of our homes simply to accommodate those who simply wish to locate here? Terms such as equitable and affordable housing and inclusive zoning are casually and recklessly mentioned as possible reasons to consider such changes. Might I remind you that our city and our fine neighborhoods continue to become quite diverse. We do not restrict the sale of any property to any financially qualified buyer. To date, I have yet to hear a single plausible reason for the council to even consider the proposed change. Further, even if such a reason were identified or devised, such change should not be restricted to the A4 district. To avoid the appearance of favoritism, I would suggest these changes also be applied to the A1, A2, and A3 districts, as this proposed change would reportedly affect at least 2/3 of all single-family housing units in Webster. The call by some for a vote of our residents should not be casually dismissed. Finally, thanks for representing our city. Each of you have likely found out, as did I, that no matter what you do, you will judge by some to be wrong. Pat Benefield. As a resident of 26 years, I'm appalled by the secret meetings of the Webster Grove City Council, rezoning A4 single-family housing to duplex housing. Even though my property is not located in the A4 area, this new zoning would affect the density of population, causing traffic problems, plus the school system would experience challenges. This proposal should be on the ballot in November so taxpayers can vote on it. Bruce Eckhart, I want you to hear my heart on this issue of A4 rezoning. My family relocated to Webster Groves from a farm town in Ohio. We were attracted to the small town values, diversified opinion of the residents, the historical architecture, and ample houses of worship. We absolutely love the neighborhood desire to protect their trees. I appreciate the forethought of the town fathers some 140 years ago to plant the prairie with trees, these trees we now enjoy. We have been blessed by our forefathers. My request is to ask the town council to slow down and take measure of how this administration is changing the very character of Webster Groves. The thoughts of the city planners need a broader review. 7 or 8 generations have made Webster Groves what it is today. Are we ready to throw out the goodness of the play Our Town, which I was told was patterned from Webster Groves? I have a garage on my property which is not designed to house today's cars. It was built in 1908. To demolish it, I have to get some sort of historical preservation permit and allow the city to study my intentions. It makes no sense to me that I need to go to all these measures over a single car garage when the city can determine the rezoning of 69% of Webster Groves with little resident input. This limits long-term planning and is not subjected to critical thinking or the vote of the residents. Please slow this A4 zoning down to get greater voter input and support. I'm reminded of Elvis Presley's song, Only Fools Rush In. We're thoughtful people, but I feel we are rushing a high impact decision for no reason. This town council has much wisdom, and I'm hoping we slow down and measure the impact of the A4 decision. My desire is that later generations will look back on your stewardship of our community with favor and appreciation that characterized great foresight and work. Kathleen Hanrahan. I've been a Webster Groves resident, homeowner, and taxpayer and voter residing off of South Rock Hill, south of Big Bend for 36 years. During that time, I have had 2 homes for my family. I moved from our larger home when my children grew up to move 1 block away in order to stay in the same pleasant neighborhood. I willingly paid my Webster Groves property taxes each year because of the value I place in our schools and community. I am very opposed to the reclassification of A4 single-family housing to duplex housing. The creation of duplex housing in this area will place additional pressure on the area infrastructure, sewer, roads, and power that the area cannot support. This is a problem that is serious concern due to the ongoing water drainage issues in the South Rock Hill area. During rainstorms, my neighbors and I face water seepage in our basements. This is in spite of ongoing repairs. This drainage problem was present in both of the homes I owned. Rezoning resulting in duplex housing will put additional pressure on an already taxed drainage system. I invested 36 years of my life and livelihood in Webster Groves, expecting to receive a profitable return on my investment. The rezoning will reduce my neighborhood property values, which I depend on to support my retirement. I'm also concerned that the area targeted for rezoning is the area where moderate priced homes are located. Why has the council not considered rezoning the areas with larger lots and higher housing values? Millie Eckhart, thank you for allowing me to speak into this subject. I know that we are all here and addressing this because we have a deep love for our community and seek to always improve it. I'm against the A4 rezoning because I do not believe it will enhance our community. I am concerned that the increase in population will burden our infrastructure. I am also concerned for increased traffic and parking situations. I believe that there will be an increased need for more schools, more teachers, more first responders, etc. I also believe this proposal will change Webster Groves and drive taxes to proportions beyond what we have already seen. Today, we have a diverse community. The median income is approximately $102,000 per household. This tax burden could be more than the community could bear. Cheryl Haney. I am a lifetime resident of Webster Groves. I grew up here, left for college, and returned to raise my family here. I own and live on one of the A4 zone blocks. My overall feeling is that adding some duplexes in the A4 zone could be a healthy change for the diversity of our community. With that said, I have an underlying concern that we as a city need to address before that rezoning takes place. My request is for the city to review and update the guidelines of accountability for the landlords and property owners of rental property in Webster Groves. We as a city are not currently holding landlords accountable for the maintenance and appearance of their rental properties. As we are all aware, our traditional property owners can and do receive citations from the inspection office on any items in question and are given very clear time for correction. Currently, Webster Groves has a local landlord who is also a lawyer and should be held accountable, who owns somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 single and a few double occupancy properties. Most are up and down the Kirk of Brentwood edge of the A4 plan. He is not being held accountable for the property's exterior appearance or maintenance. I can only assume he isn't our only subject of concern. He's the only one I can speak to from personal experience. This landlord owns several single-family homes on my block. Without checking the map or even looking up properties that he owns, you could drive our block today, and with your educated guess, you could pick out which properties are rentals and which are owner-occupied. And in my opinion, that shouldn't be the case. My direct request to the council is if they are considering passing the A4 rezoning to the building of duplexes, then please take a real look at the regulations and requirements for landlords in Webster Groves. The guidelines need to be updated and reviewed to include an action plan for the neighbors to report issues as well as timeline for concerns to be addressed. Betty Sue Haneke. We are against the rezoning to A4. We already have duplexes in Webster Groves and think this will encourage absentee landlords. These lots are not big enough to keep our community the wonderful place it is. Will cause overcrowding in our already overcrowded schools. This should go to a vote of the people. We do not want to turn Webster Groves into the new North St. Louis. Please do not do this. Sheila Noonan, I have a number of major concerns that need to be addressed regarding the A4 rezoning. 1, why not all of Webster Groves? Why just the smaller, more affordable homes? 2, why are the taxpayers affected in these red areas unable to vote on this issue? 3, what are the parameters for where exactly these can be built? What about surrounding neighbors, traffic and lighting issues, parking, etc.? Homeowners in A4 areas should certainly be informed with more details. 4, how does the city plan to regulate and hold property owners and or renters accountable to Webster ordinances and codes in order to protect the existing homeowners? We need more information and the chance to vote on something that affects our property and neighborhood. Your May 4th council vote should be tabled and presented to the people for vote. Jeff and Donna Beasley. The A4 zoning change is very concerning. We came across this proposal in the Webster Kirkwood Times. We did not know this issue was even up for consideration, and until about 2 weeks ago, there are a few issues that we feel need to be addressed. When individuals bought into A4 zones, many were buying into single family home neighborhoods, not mixed housing. To rush this change through is questionable. Can a pause be taken so the affected residents can have time to address this? Shouldn't the zoning change apply to all of Webster Groves and not just to 69% of residences? Since the zoning change affects 69% of the residences, it would only be fair for this to be moved to a citywide initiative and put on a ballot for all residents to vote on. Nick Mcfarland. I am reaching out as a concerned citizen to express my vehement disapproval for the proposed zoning change to District A4, specifically allowing the building of 2-family units. These recent years have seen an ever-increasing loss of the preservation of our community's historic nature, and this would be just one more step in that direction. I, along with many other homeowners in the area, are investing countless dollars to preserve and or restore our homes, allowing them to remain in the condition in which they were originally built. The atmosphere that currently exists in Webster Groves is why we live here, and the only reason many of us are willing to pay the premium to do so. Allowing the conversion of homes to duplexes and the building of other two-family units will be a blight on our neighborhood and drive many of us out. I ask that you please vote down this proposal, or at least amend it to remove the provision for two-family units. Ann Blackburn, I am a Webster Groves resident living on Lyman Place in the A4 zoned area. I did not know anything about the proposed zoning changes until I had read the Webster Kirkwood Times. I would like to voice my displeasure at this proposal. The houses in Lyman Place have sold recently in the $500,000 to $600,000 range. Changing the zoning to allow duplex housing will lower real estate values. Has anyone reviewed real estate values in the designated A4 zones? There are many streets in this zone where houses are above $200,000. This proposal needs to be reviewed. Catherine Basso, Katie and Lou Basso, I'm sorry. We disagree with the proposed A4 rezoning measure and would like to see an opportunity for community input on this issue. Sue Darcy, I am a resident of Mildred off of Bompart Avenue. Currently, Bompart is essentially a one-lane road because of the number of residents who park there. I strongly suggest that all new duplex housing be required to have off-street parking that could contain at least 2 vehicles. Otherwise, each duplex will be contributing 2 to 4 or more vehicles to our limited street parking. Brian Bergfeld, I read the full page ad by the Webster Groves Residents Organization and found it disagreeable. I support rezoning to allow for buildings that make the most sense to the owner. Someone wants to build a duplex on an empty lot and they can pass the architectural review board, then great, I see no problem with that. To say that building duplexes will reduce affordability is gaslighting at its best. Joan Esserman, as a resident of an A4 area, I am concerned that many in my area are not aware of the complex issues concerning upcoming action affecting our major assets. Please consider an informative postcard mailing to folks in those areas and also postponing a final vote. Thanks for your consideration of this. Jim Weinstra, I write to express my strong opposition to 2 critical issues coming to the fore that will have huge impacts on the quality of living in this great city. First is the A4 housing proposal. The scope of this proposal is massive and transformational. The density duplexes would bring to much of the town itself would be greatly increased. Houses will be much closer together, and in many cases at the expense of green spaces. Today's cost of renovative building duplexes would make it much more expensive for newcomers and young families to move to Webster. In my judgment, for a city council to be the final decision-making body on a matter of this importance is governmental overreach. Please, at a minimum, put this to a citywide November vote. The other hot topic affecting Webster residents is the SG Collaborative's development. Allowing this to go through will result in A, increased traffic congestion due to increased demands on north-south use on Rock Hill, Gray, Gore, and Elm. People trying to get from Crestwood and other South County areas to places like Boeing, Clayton, Umsel, Lambert, etc., are forced to transit these roads. We can thank politicians years ago for stopping the planned extension of I-170 to I-55 for bringing us this traffic volume. Having the addition of the mixed use and residential population SG would entail will only make it worse. Most new residents of the SG condos or apartments will have 1 or 2 automobiles, more traffic for limited roads to handle. B, as it is now, Lockwood from City Hall west to Rock Hill has already become Del Mar Loop Light. With Bristol and Ambrose school drop-off, congestion morning and afternoon already a logjam, increased traffic the SG project would bring would make Lockwood less safe than it is now. C, environmental deterioration will be another drawback to SG. As many know, there's great controversy as to building warehouse and distribution centers in floodplains like the Creve Coeur Lake, Maryland Heights area that add to the flooding of the Missouri River. The reason is when you replace water absorbing soil with concrete and blacktop, the water goes to other places like Kirkham Road. The creek next to the road already cannot handle the heavy rains we get when it is now mostly forested. Our area does not need another concrete eyesore like the River de Pear. J.E. Lurch. This is the letter I just sent to the Webster Kirkwood Times regarding the proposed A4 zoning changes. Let's examine the reasoning of those favoring the proposed zoning changes in Webster. Allow a more diversified housing assortment in Webster Groves. Create more diverse housing stock. Build a consciously inclusive community. Improve housing access. A more accessible price point. Make our community more welcoming, more inclusive, and more diverse. All of the feel-good terminology. Sorry, but Webster Groves do not need virtue signaling zoning changes to be welcoming or inclusive. Let's look at the numbers. The average sales price for a home in St. Louis County is $220,000. As described by the Webster Groves Residents Organization, a home is being purchased in Webster approximately every 15 days for under $200,000. There's $20,000 worth of affordability right there. If you want a broader scope, the average sales price in the US is currently $353,048. Webster looks very accessible by St. Louis County numbers and definitely by US figures. Inclusivity is a noble concept, but doubling up on density is not a way to make Webster Groves more affordable. Why not concentrate on expanding retail density, thus lowering the ever-increasing property taxes that genuinely make Webster Groves inaccessible, especially for longtime residents who struggle to stay in the community with this burden. Lower property taxes would make housing more affordable for young families as well. Affordability is a relative concept, and it's not clear why Webster is trying to be all things to all people. I'm sure my letter will result in cries of racism and white privilege. It is shameful and absurd to make this proposal about race, but that is what's happening. And Debbie Salberg, I would respectfully argue that the proposed changes to the A4 zoning district will not create an opportunity for affordable housing. Rather, it will eliminate affordable housing and increase the cost of housing in Webster Groves. Replacing an existing single-family resident with 2 attached units will require the acquisition of the single-family residence. Although there are some ill-maintained single-family homes in Webster Groves, they are limited. The vast majority of A4 zone lots are occupied by completely livable, solid residential structures. Therefore, the cost of acquiring these residences will not be cheap. Demolition will add to the cost. New construction generally is more expensive than existing structures. The cost of acquisition and demolition will add to the cost. The resulting may be 2 residential units, but they will not be affordable. I also see issues with the lot coverage and driveways. Although the proposed ordinance limits lot coverage to 32%, I can see a number of variance requests for just a little bit more lot coverage. Although more units means more driveways, also more units mean more driveways, which will add to traffic and safety issues. Finally, the 60-foot lot width will concentrate the 2-family to South Webster, as most of the northern part of the town is platted with 50-foot wide lots. I believe this wholesale rezoning, which is what it really is inappropriate and will be to the detriment of the city of Webster Groves. That is all I have, but Katie has more.
Good job, Jen.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, very well done.
Well, this is a hard act to follow, Act 2. Okay. Martin Elkins, while I understand the goal to improve housing opportunities in the city, I am very disappointed in the council moving forward on any changes to the current zoning rules without first reaching out to those citizens that may be affected to notify them of any proposal and possible changes. As currently written, I am opposed to the zoning bill. Another item I find difficult to understand is the method used to determine which areas are included in this bill. If the goal is to improve opportunities in Webster, shouldn't it encompass all of the city? It seems that many of the more costly areas of the city are not affected. These plots seem to have the larger plots and could support duplexes better than smaller areas currently included in the plan. Ken Picola, I do not believe the city council has provided enough information to residents about the pros and cons of the proposed A4 zone rezoning change and gathered enough feedback to approve this change on May 4th. I am concerned that building duplexes will increase the population of Webster Groves and change the character of our charming city. Please share more information in a public forum and get more feedback. Also, consider letting the community vote on an issue as important as this. Joan Bates, changing zoning laws in the A4 district to make it easier to slap up duplexes, even if every other house in the neighborhood is single family, seems arbitrary and short-sighted. I wonder if anyone in support of these changes lives in an A4 area. By claiming anyone who is opposed to these changes is promoting exclusion and denying diversity is just plain wrong. The beauty and design of our smaller neighborhoods and wanting to keep them as single-family houses is a valid enough reason for opposition with no meanness intended. Please do not vote on this on May 4th. Bill and Sally Delabar, we oppose the change to the A4 zoning and believe this matter should be put to a vote of the residents of Webster Groves rather than a decision of the city council. Dan Studelska, I live in one of the neighborhoods affected by your proposed rezoning change. We already have fill-in housing selling for almost 1 million on previously modest properties. This change protects the wealthy residents and literally tells me we are not wanted. We have made significant investments in upgrading our property and hope to sell it when we eventually retire as affordable to a family, not to a fill-in investor. We hope the A4 rezoning change and agree it should be put before the voters. Gina Hayden, this is too important of a deal to be decided by the city council. This should be put to the vote of the people. Hillary Babcock, I fully support the rezoning proposal that would allow more duplexes in the community. John Bellinger, recently I became aware of the A4 rezoning proposal through local media. This proposal, if enacted, has the potential to alter the makeup and constitution of neighborhoods in Webster Groves. This issue should be decided at the ballot box. Give voice to the residents. Something with the potential for change to the significance of the A4 proposal should also be open for public input regarding how changes would affect the neighborhood before said changes are finalized, if their proposal were to gain voter approval. Excuse me. Susan Nordman, it has been announced that the Webster Grove City Council is planning to implement a zoning change, A4, affecting 69% of the city housing without the consent of residents. This proposal to bring about social change will be a major disaster for this wonderful city. Wants and needs are two different things. No one is entitled to live here. All anyone is entitled to is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Remember, council members, you were elected to serve the current residents of Webster Groves and preserve the character of the community, not to serve those that want to live in Webster Groves. D. Gentile, there is too much misinformation of the rezoning. Revising our dated zoning rules to fit the changes of the world is needed. There is no data to back up the lies that revising the zoning will decrease property value. In fact, it is the opposite. Revised zoning will increase values as seen in neighboring communities. There are very few opinions and options in Webster to downsize or get a starter home. Yet our neighboring communities have these housing options and are seeing larger increases year after year of property value than we have in Webster. Adding flexibility in Webster housing will increase home values, not decrease it, as more people will look to Webster to live. Duplexes are desirable by younger families, single parent families, and older generation. Don't we want a diverse population in Webster? Progress will increase home values. Let's adjust all zoning in Webster to accommodate the diverse needs of our community and build upon our beautiful walkable community. Gary W. Schmidt, it has just recently come to our attention that the city is proposing a zoning change to the A4 zoned residential areas. I was stunned that I just learned about this and a vote is expected on May 4th. After canvassing others on my block, indeed, no one had heard of this until just recently when it was published in the Webster Kirkwood Times. We then reached out to other friends in Webster and found none that was knowledgeable about the proposed change in zoning until just recently. This tells me that the city did not make a concerted effort to inform their community. While we vehemently disagree with the proposal, this type of proposed zoning change has for changing and reaching consequences and should at very least be a full and broad discussion in the community with the public voting on any such changes. It should not be an almost unknown, undisclosed topic voted on by the city council. Bridget Wilkie Grimm, vote no for the A4 rezoning proposal and vote no to the Old Webster Redevelopment Project. It is unrealistic to think you can build affordable housing and think it will stay affordable in the future. The only way housing will ever become affordable is when it is less desirable to live in a community. What is the goal of saturating our community and housing? Why does something that is inappropriate for our community's land mass when what we have now is why people want to live here in the first place? It would make more sense to stop knocking down nice, affordable existing houses and replacing them with a price tag 4 times as high. If you stop knocking down affordable housing and start filling the vacant storefronts in Old Webster, Old Orchard, and the Crossing area, there would be no reason to build more and oversaturate our charming and attractive community. John Mcfarland, as a 43-year resident homeowner on an A4 lot, I strongly oppose the planned rezoning of A4 lots in Webster Groves. I support an increase in diversity, but not at the expense of certain homeowners without any guarantee of any success. Based on the information in the past week's local newspaper, this effort seems to be driven by the desire to increase diversity, but ignores all factors that create segregated housing patterns except price. There is no guarantee and no execution process to ensure that any increase in diversity will result. In fact, the price of the future duplexes will be driven in large part by developers and real estate agents whose primary motivation is higher profit and/or higher price. There is nothing wrong with this, nor is there with the idealistic desire to increase diversity. However, the destabilization of property values and increase in density with many potential negative effects is not justified by these motivations and is, in my opinion, irresponsible, at best naive, given the significance of a home and the network of many homeowners and the uncertain outcome of diversity in any area. This is especially true since only a certain group of Webster homeowners will bear the primary consequences. Why are the larger lots not included? Why is there not a vote on this issue, which so strongly affects the future of so many of us? More information on something so important for our future and a vote by all citizens of Webster Groves is needed. David N. Sterling. I'm concerned and disappointed at the lack of involvement citizen has been afforded by the City Council in the rezoning of A4 housing zones. I believe I'm up on most of what is happening with City Council and issues that are before the council, but this slipped by me. I think that if more people were aware of the proposal, you'd have more of an outcry. I used my savings to buy the house on Greeley because the neighborhood was a nice, quiet, single-family neighborhood. We don't have wide streets, and there's generally not enough parking for guests who visit because everyone has cars. Where will additional residents park? I don't want to live in a neighborhood with duplexes and townhouses because I feel it will bring down the value of my property. I can't believe that the purpose behind this proposal is actually to provide opportunity for housing to the underserved residents. I feel this is an opportunity for the council to raise money by increasing the number of residents in the city. If this were really about providing affordable housing, why did we limit it to the A4 zones? Why not other zones? They could actually accommodate larger buildings and provide affordable housing. I'm sure that if this were on the ballot in November, that the citizens of Webster Groves would vote against it. I think the process being used is underhanded and not transparent enough for a topic this foundational to the city. James Jem Caesar. Perplexingly, Webster's proposed affordable duplexes are only permitted on tiny A4 lots, which will already contain our most affordable housing stock. This is backwards. True progressive policies eat the richest first. In this case, the A1 lots over 20,000 square feet. At the proposed lot rate of 3,750 square feet, my wife's A1 property could be converted to 15 affordable units within a year. The 29 A1 homes in the 40-acre Old Westbury subdivision could be rezoned to yield several hundred such units. Include all the Webster A1 zones, and we can create thousands of low-income units while displacing only a relatively insignificant number of current Webster residents to Kirkwood or beyond. Is not calling on A1s and A2s and A3s in turn to also help solve affordable housing crisis and injustice to many, including needy real estate speculators? Going further, perhaps now is the time to equalize all A zones. Seriously, the rezoning proposal is a big deal, and governance philosophy changes of this magnitude should demonstrate having the broad support of Webster voters in a general election, not quickly adopted in a couple of pandemic-shrouded city council meetings. Joseph H. Wyrick. My comments are directed to the proposed change in the A4 classification of the city's zoning code. The proposed amendment provides a major change directly impacting approximately 70% of city residents and seem to be controversial. For example, according to the Webster Kirkwood Times, at a recent Webster Grove City Council meeting, at least one citizen proponent of the A4 amendment labeled, in my view, anyone who opposes the amendment as an exclusionist, an interesting stance for those professing a strong interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was unable to locate any data concerning the results experienced in other communities adopting similar zoning changes. Thus, it appears the city is well on the way to adopting wholesale changes to the zoning laws, which directly impact 70% of city residences, with apparently little or no idea whether the changes will further the stated goal or might result in unintended negative consequences. Does the phrase, let's do something even if it's wrong, come to mind? What's the rush? Why not walk before we run, as recently observed by Councilman Franklin, and target a small section of the city to start? However, if the intent is to move forward with the present proposal when its consequences appear to be guesswork as a matter of equity, then amendment should be subject to a citywide vote. Sean Devereaux. As a Webster Groves resident in one of the A4 single-family housing areas, I find it hard to believe that you are all taking it upon yourselves to make a decision that impacts 69% of the homes within our city. If you truly represent our community and our interests, then do right by your citizenry and put this up to the vote next November. If you don't respect your constituents enough to allow us to make a decision that impacts 70% of your residents, then we'll be escorting you to the door as our representatives. Please think twice before making such an uninformed decision that will impact so many of us. Wayne Davis, why are you limiting this to the smallest of the A4 lots? The neighborhoods with the smallest lots already stressing the infrastructure and allowable street parking. Larger lots would be better able to support two-family dwellings. Neil Bartnett, my name is Neil Bartnett. I live in Webster. I want to voice my strong opposition to the A4 rezoning proposal. This has the potential to significantly change neighborhood dynamics for the worse in the affected area. I, for one, would not like to see a single-family home torn down so a developer can build a new two-family. This means, among other things, more cars parked on the streets and more rental units. Neither is good for our community. Please vote no on this proposal. Melissa Sondag, please put the A4 rezoning change up for a vote in November. I would also like to know how many city council members live in the A4 rezoning area. Cheryl Bartnett, on the proposed A4 rezoning in Webster Groves, how little regard is being given to permanently changing the character and density of our beloved neighborhoods. All the citizens of Webster Groves, and most importantly, the people who have invested in these 5,560 A4 zoned homes, deserve a vote on whether this rezoning should be allowed or not. Webster Groves was not created on an extension of the city with duplexes and flats and alleys that provide buffers to this type of building, but rather as something different. Of neighborhoods comprised of single-family homes forming one of the loveliest inner ring suburbs in St. Louis. Creating more diverse housing stock at the expense of the current neighborhood structure is short-sighted and short-changes current residents whose interests we voted you in office to protect. Mayor Walsh and council members Alexander, Arnold, Bliss, Franklin, Richardson, and Smith, please vote no on this amendment proposed by Mara Perry and her staff. Linda McDowell. I chose Webster Groves after living in Clayton and University City. The large trees, lawns, and gardens were among the reasons for moving here and staying here even as our taxes and home maintenance costs increase. Now our precious neighborhood is losing green space, character, and affordability due to large infill houses that have tiny trees, token lawns, and driveways that extend to the property line. Neighboring homes that were previously dry now get water in the basement. Allowing duplexes in this area will exacerbate the loss of green space and change the ambiance of the neighborhood even more. Duplexes on small lots will also cause overcrowding of our streets. If the city thinks duplexes are needed, the required lots should be large enough to allow for ample off-street parking and still retain enough green space for children to play outdoors. I suppose the A4 rezoning change, and I agree it should be put down before the voters. I'm sorry. I oppose the A4 rezoning change and agree it should be put before voters. Seth Brothers. I write today to oppose the A4 rezoning proposal. So far, the council has not provided any data to prove this to the citizens of Webster Groves that this plan holds benefit to current residents. No studies have been presented showing the short-term and long-term implications of the plan. Have there been requests for this type of change to occur? If so, who's asking? Is the city ready to support the multifamily homes that will be built? Is the school district ready to support these families? Currently, we don't have answers to these questions and others, and it appears as though this is simply a way to fulfill an altruistic goal, which does nothing more than give residents a reason to pat themselves on the back while also bringing in more tax base for the city. Is this idea a result of the defeat of the special use tax? In recent years, many affordable homes have been torn down to make way for new homes, which cost 4 times more than the home which was originally standing. I have seen this firsthand on my street to at least 8 homes. What is to prevent this from occurring in the A4 zoning area and simply building large, expensive duplexes? If corporate builders are allowed to purchase properties in the zoning area and build a duplex which covers most of the lot, leaving a little green space, this is no longer affordable housing. It is naive to think this will not occur. It is also naive to believe the proposed changes will not come to the other zoning areas which are currently not affected. As a resident of Webster Groves, I choose to stay here because neighborhoods in our city look and feel different from those in other cities that are nearby. The green space in our city does not simply exist in parks and common areas. Many of our neighborhoods have ample space between homes and properties that are well kept. People care about living here and invest in the property they own. While the proposed changes may not affect our neighborhoods in the immediate future, the look and feel of our neighborhoods will eventually see significant changes. The city is made of its citizens. Without the support of the citizens, the city cannot choose and should not function. It is vital that the public be allowed to vote on ideas, proposals like this, which come with significant short-term and long-term implications. John Berenson. The amendments for revisions to the zoning code being discussed and voted on tonight relating to the construction of duplex units in the city of Webster Groves have their roots in laudable goal, making housing in our city affordable for those with limited incomes. However, I believe the results of this legislation will not have the intended effect. There are very few undeveloped lots in Webster Groves. This legislation would allow developers to purchase existing homes on A4 lots, tear them down, and construct duplex units for sale or rent. For this to work, it must be profitable. Therefore, the smallest, least expensive housing found on an A4 lot, especially those that haven't yet been updated or expanded, will be purchased and redeveloped. These new developments will be designed to build to maximize the profit for the builder, most likely costing as much or more to purchase or rent per unit than the house previously found on the site. There are some places in Webster Groves where duplex housing would strengthen the neighborhood, but these areas are limited. This is a natural outcome of living in an older city and one of the main reasons people want to live here. All over our city, our modestly sized affordable housing stock is being transformed into larger, grander, more expensive homes. This is the most pressing issue facing our city in terms of maintaining its diversity, sustainability, and character. The bill voted on tonight only hastens that change. I respectfully ask the council to reconsider this amendment. Marty Ward, Webster residents want to vote on A4 proposal that could change the community forever. Our homes are our investment and we don't want the city to dictate our future or be influenced by developers. There are many affordable homes in Webster Groves and new construction costs are high. So what's the point? Scott Walburn, I am not in favor of rezoning A4 single family housing to duplex housing. One of the reasons I purchased a home and moved to my neighborhood over 35 years ago is because it is comprised of single family homes. I wanted to live in a neighborhood of single family homes. There is nothing wrong with duplexes, apartments, mobile homes, etc. The qualities of each appeal to different people. I am drawn to single family homes, so that is where I live and would like to continue to live. But if having more multifamily homes is good for Webster Groves, I have to wonder why it is only good for Webster Groves to have them on the smallest lots in the city. Logic would dictate that the larger the lot, the more easily the lot will accommodate additional families. So I have to ask, why only the smallest lots? This is good for Webster Groves, and let all Webster Groves benefit from it, not just the smallest flats in the city. Greg Krinsky. A4 should be put on a ballot to be voted on. Greg Krinsky. I'm opposed to the current proposal for redevelopment. Alternative would be to keep green space with nature trails. Jennifer Walber. I am against the rezoning proposal that allows for the potential building of duplexes and single-family neighborhoods in the A4 zone. As a current resident that owns a home in one of these neighborhoods, I do not appreciate the city council potentially changing the landscape of the neighborhood I live in. If this is such a great idea, I would suggest you implement the zoning change in all of Webster. Any change is hard, and a rezoning proposal like this that impacts the majority of single-family houses in our community should be put to a vote. Rich Mozzarella. I'm writing concerning the proposed A4 rezoning ordinance. This ordinance doubles the population density of the A4 neighborhoods and eliminates the truly affordable single-family housing in Webster Groves. Let's consider one typical example. A 1,330 square foot home last month in Webster Groves in the A4 zone sold for $168,500, or about $127 square foot. The demolition cost of this house is about $20,000. When one considers tear down and debris removal, the replacement of a 67-year-old cast iron sewer line, and removal of the asbestos floor tile. These are typical costs and expenses in our area. This brings the cost of the lot with a new sewer line to $188,500. The average size of a duplex unit in the United States is 900 square foot. The minimal cost of new construction of a finished unit is 200 a square foot. Two duplex units are 1,800 square foot total, and therefore their total construction cost is $360,000. This brings the total duplex cost to $548,500, or $274,250 a duplex unit. This is the bare minimum and does not include the recent increases in lumber prices and other construction materials that could easily add $10,000 to these no-frills units. We all know that developers will try to upsell these units with upgrades in kitchens and baths to increase their profit margin, with the resulting duplex now costing close to $300,000 a unit. The resulting monthly rent of these units will not be cheaper than the monthly mortgage cost of the original house. How can it be? The property owner has a mortgage too. Please abandon this ordinance. Sarah Buckeye. I write to ask you to support the Webster Groves Planning and Development Department's current recommendations for amending the zoning code. I fully support the preservation and new construction of affordable housing and think duplexes are a contributory component to this mission. I live directly adjacent to the A4 in South Webster and enjoy the multifamily housing already included in our neighborhood, like Goodall Manor and a few sporadic multifamily properties. I wish there was more of it. Council should pass this because a vote against this measure would signal to the greater St. Louis community that Webster should be reserved for only families that can afford $800,000 or more for a home, which appears to be the going rate for most teardowns and new construction near me. I do not support this. While I do not believe residents or council members wanting to restrict the A4 zoning in any way that makes duplex construction more difficult or motivated by racial prejudice or the desire to exclude people on the basis of race or ethnicity, such policies do, even if unintentionally, impose and restrict economic diversity. My husband and my first home purchases was a duplex in the Shaw neighborhood, and our tenants were a Webster Groves theater manager, assistant manager of a local wine bar, sous chef for Gerard Kraft, and a female couple recently relocated from Chicago back to one of their hometowns in St. Louis. I would welcome any and all of them, so neighbors today, and want Webster to be a place that others like them can afford to live. That said, this zoning adjustment does not go far enough. Below is a link to the city of Edna recently updated new multifamily affordable housing plan that was updated in March 2021. I've included this as an example to demonstrate what is possible and a step I'd like to see pursued in Webster Groves. And there's a link. Please consider not only supporting the current recommendations to amend the zoning code, but also a steady pursuit of more inclusionary zoning that prioritizes making Webster Groves affordable and welcoming to all. We're getting there. Cheryl Christine Hood. I'm opposed to rezoning of A4 areas to allow for duplex housing. My neighborhood would be affected with increased population. The rezoning would change the nature of this neighborhood dramatically. I have concerns about parking, which is already an issue for the single family dwelling on these streets. My area is a former subdivision. There are no sidewalks. The increased need for parking on the street and increased traffic would be detriment to walkers. What effect would this have on current property values? To increase the density of a neighborhood of small homes on small lots does not seem reasonable. The proposed change has come to light only recently without discussion in the community. I feel the consideration of such dramatic change should involve the entire community of homeowners in the A4 area. Jeffrey Goff, please vote no on rezoning A4 housing. And the last one is from Linda Tatum. I support the idea of affordable housing for Webster growth and suggest that some of our surrounding communities as well as Webster growth do offer that it would be nice to have more. Tearing down the more affordable homes on the smaller lots would seem to contribute to the problem rather than solving it. Just because developers, builders, and architects whose compensation is often tied to the cost and size of the project ask for permission to stretch the footprint and square footage and recent permits for duplexes or shared wall structures are not good reasons to allow this in A4 areas. For avoiding recent problems of excessive rain runoff from oversized structures on smallish lots, it would make much more sense to do a trial period in the A1, A2, A3 zoned areas, which have larger lots. Two problems would be solved. One, prevent loss of affordable home inventory, and two, reduce runoff problems of new construction. Duplexes or shared wall residences are likely to have at least 1,000 square feet each unit and allow for up to 4 occupants. This would compound parking problems. 2 parents and 2 teens can easily be driving 4 vehicles. That could mean one lot could need parking for 2 units times 4 vehicles equals as many as 8 vehicles requiring parking. Lots 65 feet wide only allow for 2 vehicles to be parked in front of the property. It has been suggested that a single drive might lead to parking for 4 vehicles at the rear of the property. That would create an eyesore for the backyard neighbors of these small lots, plus more problem runoff. As for the city having approval processes for new construction, there are instances of where they have allowed unsightly tall structures in South Webster. We cannot depend on this as a way to control problem construction without legal protection for nearby property owners. I'm opposed to this zoning bill. If it is passed, it should be for only a trial period of 3 to 5 years. Now we will check and see if there's any additional hands up. And there are 3. Okay. There are 3, and we're going to be bringing them on shortly.
Something for yourself in addition to the.
Farrell, do you have an additional comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I
No?
apologize.
Okay.
I don't know how that got up.
All right. Thank you. Clark Hodling.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I think all of you know where I stand on this issue since you've somehow let me into your closed door meetings over and over and over. Talk about this. I first wanted to just thank everyone on City Council, whether you're for this amendment or not, for sitting there and putting up with a lot of misinformation. I think it really made me sad tonight listening to so much misinformation. And I think a lot of it came from 2 full-page ads in the paper. So I would urge everybody, if you're still listening, that didn't know anything about this, get involved with your government. This has been a stated goal for this council for several years. And I think maybe the one misstep is that perhaps, the stated goal of exploring additional housing options and multifamily affordable housing should perhaps be more proactively, have a little bit more engagement with the community. Do some more visioning, some strategic planning around that goal, and then implement it. I've been to some town meetings on this subject, but it sounds like that there needs to be more discussion around it because there's obviously a lot of opposition. The last thing I'm going to say, and I should probably bite my tongue and not say this, but I participated in a meeting recently that was talking about the history of integrating our pool in Webster. And they read letters from 1950 when people were against the integration of the pool. And this whole last hour, I've been thinking about that meeting, listening to the tone of some of these letters. I applaud the effort to give more options to more people in our community. And I hope you have the courage to vote for this tonight. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Alyssa Sullivan. Just one moment. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Oh, hello, Council. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm just coming out of another meeting myself, and your meeting is just beginning, so I can't even imagine how exhausted you must be. But in case it is useful for the record, I wanted to be another voice in strong support of the Plan Commission's recommendation to you and your vote for that. I think that this council has shown such wonderful initiative through many years now in drawing the community into conversation through town halls and other ways of listening to community members who have taken the time to engage with you and other bodies. And I think that you have a really strong record of responding to what people are asking for and thinking about. And I support you in your decision to vote for this evening. Thank you.
David Sterling will be joining us. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, hi. I listened to the gentleman who just said this has been a topic of discussion in the community for years, and that's just not true. I live here. Everybody I know lives here. Our neighborhood, nobody knew about this until just a few weeks ago. This discussion of this has been a topic for a long time that the community has understood is just not true. And all of the discussion we just heard about we're opposed to it, that's all fine, but it really has not been in the community. It has not been discussed, and we need to discuss it. It needs to be open, and we need to vote on it. Thank you.
There are no more hands up, Mayor.
Great job, Jen and Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're muted, Jerry.
Katie and Jen must be exhausted by now. So I want to thank you. It's been a long day.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to move on to new business, of which we have nothing, I think. So we'll move on to unfinished business, which is Bill 9145. And I need
Mayor,
someone.
Yeah,
Yes.
before we read Bill 9145, I'd like to ask Mara a few questions.
Can we read the bill and then you can ask Mara the questions in the
Sure.
context before we take a vote on it
Okay.
or do anything with it? Go ahead. So Emerson, if you would call for the third reading.
I'd like to call for the third reading of Bill number 9145 and the subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9145, third and final reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 50, the zoning code of Webster Groves by amending the use and dimensional regulations for single-family attached and two-family dwellings in the A4 7,500 square foot residence district in sections 53.070 at Sequentia, 53.100, and amended definitions related to those uses in section 53.020 and matters related thereto.
Okay, now go ahead, Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mara, please bear with me. I have a series of questions I need to ask you.
Sure.
So my first question is, does the current zoning code allow the building of duplex housing in the A4 zone now?
That is correct. It is currently a approved or permitted use. It has some restrictions to it, but it is a permitted use already in the A4.
And when was this current code approved?
1956.
So this has been on the book since 1956 that you can build a duplex in the A4 zone.
Correct.
So what is the definition in the current zoning code of duplex dwelling?
So give me just a moment and I'm going to read to you the current definition. And it is just so to point out, this current definition that's in our code is the exact same definition that's been in the code since 1956. So it's dwelling, two-family, shall meet a detached or semi-detached building designed for or occupied exclusively by two families living independently of each other. So that is the current definition in the code, which in your attachments shows that we were proposing a change to that.
Okay, so what are the current building restrictions in the current code for duplex housing?
So the current restrictions, and actually what I might do, if it's okay, I'm going to share the screen because I actually have the PowerPoint that I presented previously, and that might be helpful. So this is the 1956 zoning ordinance. This is the current language that's in our code. Two-family dwellings which comply with the minimum lot area per family, which we are not proposing to change. The minimum yard requirements, which again, we're not proposing to change, and parking regulations. Now, the old parking regulations are pretty similar to our new parking regulations, one parking space for each unit. And then the other restriction that's on there is that it's 40% or more of the frontage on the same side of the street between the two intersections had to have been occupied by either two-family or multiple dwellings. So those are the restrictions that are currently in the code.
Okay. So what is the definition in the proposed zoning code for duplex dwelling in the A4 district?
I'm going to put that up too because I believe I have it here already. What we were doing is we were asking to remove the words, right now it says a detached or semi-detached. We were removing the or semi-detached. And then we were adding in that the two families living independent of each other would be in separate dwelling units adjoined by a party wall or a fire-rated floor assembly on a single lot. So that was to kind of give a clarification for a two-family that ties in with the building code, because we also had added into the code previously dwelling single-family attached. And so that had been in the code for something else prior.
Okay. Will all homes in the A4 zone be reclassified from single-family dwellings to duplex housing if the A4 zoning is approved?
No, they will not. When St. Louis County does their assessment of a piece of property, they look at what's on that property. So if it's a single-family home, it's assessed as a single-family home. It is only assessed as a two-family if there are actually two units, separate units that are defined and have been built as two separate units.
Okay. And my last question is, what will the criteria for building duplex housing in the A4 zone be in the new code?
So in the new code, we've kept what was previously in the code. So we will have a minimum square footage of lot required. We have a minimum set of setbacks. We have a maximum floor area ratio. We have included additional parking regulations. So essentially the same maximum size of the two units together cannot exceed the maximum size of a single family house. We've also kept the same setbacks from the side yard as is currently required for a single family house. The only setback that is changing is that it would allow that party wall to be shared. And other minimum requirements are all basically tying into what is currently the series of regulations within that same A4 district.
Okay. And the lot size must be greater than 60 feet?
So yes, the lot width has to be greater than 60 feet, and it's not just 60 feet at the frontage, but 60 feet average overall. In addition, it also needs to be at least 7,500 square feet. So I'll give a quick example. In 2020, we had about 22 tear downs for new homes. Of those 22, 12 of them would not have met the minimum lot size or the minimum lot width and would not have been able to get two family structures on them. So we had 22 tear downs, maybe 10 of them, if they had been properly designed, could have potentially gone to a two family. And that's, so maybe 10 units, if that, in an entire year.
Thank you, Maura.
Mara, while you have that up there, just so people don't get the idea that the entire A4 has been zoned for duplexes in 1956, can you show them the two areas where the duplexes were allowed, I think? So it wasn't the whole area, it was just
No,
several.
the whole area was allowed, but because of the restriction, similar to right now, we're saying all A4, but if you don't meet certain restrictions, you wouldn't be allowed to do it. So it's the same thing. The entire A4 says you can do it, except that because of the restrictions of the 40% of existing on both sides of the street, it only allowed it in red. That is correct.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if, Mara, can you put us back to regular screen? I'm sorry.
Yes, no worries.
This is an important topic, and I hate to make you guys bear through this, but I wrote a statement that I'd like to read, and so you guys have to listen for a little bit longer, but just not Katie and Jen's voice.
Don't worry, David, I'm going to go too.
Oh, wonderful. I had the unique opportunity and pleasure of growing up on the south side of Webster Groves, just a few blocks from our rec center. My childhood was made possible because in 1974, my recently married parents, neither of whom had the opportunity to attend college, were able to purchase a 960 square foot house for approximately $20,000. As a result of my father's strong union job, my mother's unyielding work ethic, and my parents' amazing ability to make a dollar stretch, my parents were able to raise 4 children in this great city and provide each of my siblings and me with the opportunity to enjoy a life better than theirs, the epitome of the American dream. My neighborhood and school friends emanated from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, and their parents' employment was reflective of that diversity, ranging from janitors to lawyers, from union workers to doctors. Nevertheless, the overwhelming majority of my friends and neighbors looked like me. They were white. Webster Groves and suburbs like Webster Groves throughout this country have long been plagued by our lack of racial diversity. And to be clear, that long historical and too often discriminatory racial homogeny demands rectification through policies and laws that will promote and encourage racial diversity along with all forms of diversity. After all, we are better as a community and as a country when our children, neighbors, and religious networks create and encourage diversity. In 1917, after the United States Supreme Court held that zoning ordinance could not specifically ban a certain race from a certain zone, the textbook definition of overt racism, communities turned to covert racism. To prevent lower income, racially diverse families from living in neighborhoods where middle-class whites resided, local and federal officials began to promote zoning ordinances to reserve middle-class neighborhoods for single-family homes that lower income families of all races could not afford. Federal rules and redlining kept Black families from getting mortgages, and typically housing developers couldn't get financing without white-only covenants in the deeds. When Webster Groves enacted its current zoning regulations in the 1950s, one of the clear intents of the zoning regulations was to prevent racial diversity. Although the regulations theoretically permitted duplexes, due to the cumbersome rules and limitations, the spirit of the zoning regulations was crystal clear. Single-family residence was the avenue to create and promote a homogeneous character of Webster Groves, a white homogeneous character. Few can deny that over the past 50 or 60 years, Webster Groves has been productive and had a successful run. That is if you measure success solely by rising home values. Buying a home in Webster Groves has almost always been a good investment. As a result, Webster Groves has developed a character that is often rivaled by neighboring communities and communities throughout the country. However, it is abhorrent for us to fail to recognize that the Webster Groves character that so many of us cherish and invest our money in through home ownership was indeed founded and is rooted in part upon racial segregation or racism. The proposed legislation that we are voting upon this evening would remove the limitations and restrictions embedded in our antiquated zoning ordinances and thereby permit duplexes in a vast majority of Webster Groves. Effectively, Webster Groves would change from a single-family residence community to a community that would permit duplexes in addition to single-family residences, apartments, and condominiums. The effects of this legislation would obviously not be instantaneous, and in fact, it is more likely to be slow, decades-long bonification. The legislation would potentially promote and create diversity in housing, or more aptly termed inclusionary housing. The underlying question then for this council that must be answered is, why do we need or want diversity in housing? For me, diversity in housing is fundamentally important to the strength and longevity of communities, including Webster Groves. We need diversity in housing to ensure long-term residents can effectively downsize and remain residents of Webster Groves. We need diversity in housing to ensure first-time homeowners can enter the Webster Groves community without being saddled by unconscionable housing debt or outrageous rental fees. We need diversity in housing to ensure those residents that want smaller lawns, no lawns, or limited home maintenance can enjoy the city of Webster Groves. We need diversity in housing so a family can start and end in Webster Groves. Data unequivocally demonstrates that communities with diversity in housing can better endure market downturns. The data also demonstrates that diversity in housing stimulates economic and racial diversity that has been proven to be better for families, schools, and children. All laudable and intrinsically important factors that elected officials must account for when legislating. However, merely because a community has a diversity in housing does not necessarily equate to racial or economic diversity in the community. The legislation before Webster Groves Council tonight does nothing to promote or encourage racial or economic diversity. Rather, the legislation before council merely creates the opportunity for diversity of housing without ensuring that our council goals are achieved or executed upon. The legislation before us tonight does not limit the cost of the duplexes that could be built and later sold. The legislation before us tonight does not limit the rent a landlord of a duplex could charge. The legislation before us tonight does not limit the single-family residences that could be destroyed to make way for duplexes that may turn out to cost more than that old 1,000 square foot single-family residence. In sum, completely absent from this legislation is any inclusionary housing program that would actually promote and encourage racial and economic diversity. Enacting legislation that would create diversity in housing that would promote and encourage racial and economic diversity is legislation that I could support and that Webster Groves needs. This is not that legislation, however. Rather, the legislation merely abandons the idea of a single-family residence community without ensuring or creating the preconditions that would actually promote those goals and outcomes we all want and that this community needs. As a result, I cannot support this legislation under the guise that mere diversity in housing will create racial and economic diversity in our community, because this legislation does nothing to promote those objectives. With that being said, I feel it is incumbent upon me to say one last thing. Over the past few weeks, I've received numerous emails, phone calls, and texts opposing this legislation. In those written and verbal communications, too often I encountered overt and covert racism and innuendos. Terminology employed included duplexes will bring undesirables, low-income people can save money like I did to buy into Webster Groves, and duplexes will decrease my home values. First, categorically, there is no reliable data to demonstrate that duplexes decrease home values. It is difficult to overlook the underlying racial undertones triggering that belief. It is wrong and it should be immediately abandoned, for there's nothing undesirable about American resident living in a duplex, and there's nothing but conjecture that duplex residents are bad neighbors or don't care about their communities. Second, home ownership is becoming unattainable for too many Americans, regardless of race. As I began 46 years ago, my parents were able to buy a modest home here in Webster Groves for approximately $20,000. Just last year, I bought my first home after living in an apartment in Webster Groves for 3 years, an almost 100-year-old house, 1,400 square feet for $250,000. With staggering student loan debt, staying in Webster Groves was almost unattainable for me, an elected council member. Truth be told, if Webster Groves is to remain an economically diverse community and we are to increase our racial diversity, both important factors that make Webster Groves so special, residents must be willing to permit council to legislate in new ways. If residents want to remain a single-family community, residents must permit legislation that saves and promotes single-family residents that are cost-friendly. Members of this council have proposed ideas and policies that would promote and encourage racial and economic diversity, including a tax on newly built large homes, workforce housing, home maintenance and or repairs assistance, and limiting the size of new homes. This type of legislation will assist in achieving council's goals, and this is the type of legislation that the council should be working on. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Laura, you had something you wanted to add?
Yes, I do. And part of it will be in response to what David said. And I appreciate greatly sort of the theoretical framework in which you put this, David. But I do want to walk through a few things because we've been talking about housing for over 2 years now. And I want to make sure that people understand how thoroughly we in the Plan Commission have had this discussion. And there's more to come in terms of our discussions. But our first housing work session was in April of 2019. We had another one in November. We had January of 2020, twice in February of 2020, March of 2020, all work sessions that had to do with looking at diversity of housing stock, including multifamily and duplexes. We had a housing town hall meeting in November of 2019 and did a housing survey of our community in 2019, November as well, that led to our housing goals, which have been referred to tonight. Those housing goals were unanimously approved by council. Some of you here today weren't on yet, so you're not wedded to that, but one of those goals was to explore policies that would encourage multifamily housing appropriate for various income levels, including apartments, duplexes, townhomes, and patio homes. And then after that, the Plan Commission took 6 months, as we've said before. And the Plan Commission, you know, we get a report from them and they went through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of sample language of what other communities are doing, what the potential impacts are. And after that very thorough consideration, they unanimously reported this to us and recommended that we enact this. And I want to demonstrate, I want to thank them actually for all the time and effort that they have spent on our behalf and on behalf of the community. And as Neil alluded to in his remarks earlier, they're volunteers. They have professional backgrounds, many of them in planning and development, but we don't pay them a dime. They do this because they care about this community. And that the ad that was published in the Webster Kirkwood Times that I know from, I like David, have received dozens of phone calls and emails. People read that ad as if it was a news story, as if it was full of information that had been vetted and was factual. And there, the timeline suggests, none of this was done behind closed doors. That's just fundamentally false. And to suggest that we did this to suit people who don't live in Webster Groves is also not true. Well, COVID made it hard, but certainly like the mayor and David and Pam, when we could campaign in the way that allowed you to go knock on people's doors, I knocked on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of doors and had hundreds and hundreds of conversations with residents. And fundamentally, what they worried about most was the escalating home prices. Could they stay? How were they going to downsize to a smaller house when they were ready? Could they afford to move to a bigger house in Webster Groves when they were ready for that? And so, you know, this is about what people of Webster Groves has asked of us, not of developers. I'm almost finished, I promise. But one of the things I also wanted us to remember is, you know, it's not that single family homes are not being demolished. They are. Right now they are. And what is replacing them are huge homes that are very much more expensive. And I have 5 examples. I'll just read you a couple. There's a house on Summit Place in 2019, according to county tax records, was sold for $100,000. In 2020, a $585,000 house replaced it. On Simmons, $230,000 house was purchased, knocked down, and over $1 million house replaced it. On Bacon, a $190,000 house was purchased, and a $740,000 house replaced it. What this does, in my mind, is give developers the option to have 2 families in some of these homes instead of essentially giving us one family that change. If you were talking about changing the character of the neighborhood, when you take a $200,000 house and replace it with $1 million house, that's changing the character of the neighborhood. And so I want us to remember that this is part of our discussion. And then finally, I will say the people who names are on that ad in the Webster Kirkwood Times, today was the first time that any of them made a public comment. I asked and went back to the Plan Commission records as well as the council records. We had one comment tonight from one of them. They went straight to the paper with misleading information that I think does a disservice to our community. And so I did want to finally thank all of you who spoke tonight. Some of you are not going to like what I do when we come to vote, but I appreciate that you were here today directly letting us understand what your position was. I appreciate the people who called me, the people who emailed us, to really have, so we can have an exchange about this issue, not just sort of slapping up in the newspaper, whatever it is that you thought might happen. So again, thanks to the Planning Commission. And I finally want to say thank you to Mara Perry, who has spent countless hours with both the Plan Commission and us, helping us really understand what this does and what the ramifications may be down the line, and how it can, I believe, improve our community. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I want to say a few things too. And I wanted to start out with a thank you to Mara Perry and the staff for all the work you've done, you know, because this was a council request, regardless of what the community is saying and responding to. It was a council request that you go forward with this. And I want to begin by saying I fully support the creation of duplexes and townhouses and patio homes, because I do think they're essential to a full array of housing options. But I'd like to support a pathway that leads to some sort of more successful community supported projects like other cities are doing. Clustering these housing options allows for greater savings in building, and it makes it more affordable. A really good example of this is the townhouses that sit on the corner of Kirkham and Slocum, where you have a number of small townhouses that are there. They're clustered together and they work well. And I'm hoping that somewhere along the way, we can figure out how to do that. Kirkwood is doing that. Other communities are doing that. We need to do that. I will also tell you, maintaining affordable homes has always been an option for me for decades. And I like this community because we have a very good array of diverse housing in this community of 8,000 households. But for me, the economics of this duplex proposal, I think, is going to have a negative consequence on affordable housing, because I see those small duplexes, and many of them for sale. You can go to realtor.com, which I watch faithfully, and you will find them fairly frequently. There are a couple of them on the market today for $200,000. I think that the developers will find these really appealing. You can buy one of these for $200,000, tear it down, put up $800,000 because it's 4 times the value of the house, $800,000 worth of duplexes, and that small affordable starter house has disappeared from the community. And that's what I fear, and I fear that a lot. I also have to tell you that regardless of, I have the response that has come from our residents, 69% of our residents, has been very negative about this proposal. And I think it's because the expectation of people is that they bought a home in a single family neighborhood. That was the zoning rule. That's what they bought. That's what they've spent their time trying to improve and to live in. And I think they choose to live in a single family home. They don't want to live next door to two families on a small lot with 4-car garage in the back and a lot of concrete. I just think they don't want that. The other thing that finally bothers me is that we shouldn't pick off one zoning category for duplexes and protect the others. If this is good for A4, it should be good for every zoning category. And for me, it's not within, I find that I can't in good conscience vote to allow multifamily housing in our most dense neighborhood and exempt my own.
Can I say something?
Anybody else? Yes.
Sorry, are you finished? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I'm finished.
I just wanted to make the comment that this is a first step, that I feel like there's a lot of kind of hand-wringing about what isn't included here, and we have to start somewhere. And I trust that the Planning Commission picked this step because this is the one that was, in their eyes, the easiest one to achieve. It's going to be an interesting battle the next round, I guess, if this small of a change is causing this much consternation and this well-funded pushback. I am less concerned about a lot of the comments because I feel like they are so ill-informed, and because frankly, I can read the exclusion in them, and that's not something that I was elected to protect. I would say, I'm not speaking for Emerson and Karen, but the three of us did run with this as part of our promise, is that we wanted to push for greater housing variability in our community, and we were elected, and that's where the public voted. So I don't feel like we're going against the wishes of the public, regardless of comments that were brought on by misleading ads in the Webster Kirkwood Times. I just don't. I will vote in good conscience and sleep well tonight.
Anybody else? Or are we ready to call for the vote?
I'd just like to say a couple things. I do believe in the process of the Plan Commission and Mara and Danny's efforts in communicating all of the nuances of this ordinance. There are certain protections that are the same for single family homes that are applied to the duplexes, as far as lot size, impervious surfaces, parking, etc. We have not had these discussions in any closed sessions. And not only have we not had any in any closed sessions, we've had numerous discussions about housing. And in fact, that is probably why we haven't looked at some of the other goals that we have on our plate. So I'm ready to vote. I'm thankful for everybody here, and I'm glad we've had a good, healthy, robust conversation, but I do feel like we are ready to, unless Emerson and Karen, you guys are left. Let's go.
Oh, no, my questions earlier, Pam, kind of clarified the misinformation I feel that was out there. So I have always supported to make affordable housing and to have a diverse housing stock here in Webster. And just like Sarah said, this is the first step.
And I agree as well. It's listening to the comments and just totally overwhelmed by the reaction to the extensive misinformation that's out there. There's questions that I have. I mean, one of them being, why would this have to be limited to the A4 area? Could this not be included in other areas as well? But I also recognize that we have to start somewhere. And the fact too is that we're not just creating a new zoning law, we're amending one that's already existing. And I'm ready to vote.
All right, Katie, let's call for the vote.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
No. All right. Ordinance or bill number 9145 has passed. Now we will go on to 9146 and Pam.
I'll do it, Mayor.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9146 and call for its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9146, third and final reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 53, the zoning code of Webster Groves by amending the dimensional regulations to clarify lot coverage and height regulations in sections 53.043, 53.053, 53.063, 53.073, and 53.202, and amending definitions related to the dimensional regulations in sections 53.020 and matters related thereto.
Are there any questions, comments, or issues? If not, we'll call for the vote.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welch,
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
All right, 5146 has passed. And we will go on now to something different. We have new business with the Brentwood boundary request, and I believe that is coming from our city manager and our city attorney.
I yield to the city attorney.
All right. So, so that you all know, there is an interesting anomaly in our boundary lines. That is the Breckenridge, what am I calling it? I guess the Breckenridge industrial area.
Court, yeah.
Industrial area, right. And it is an area that is, it is solely industrial. It is zoned industrial. There are no residential properties that are there. There are two ways into that piece of Webster Groves. One is through Brentwood, and there is a bridge that crosses the creek there. And another one is through a tunnel underneath the railroad track. There has been a remediation process for flooding with Brentwood called Brentwood Bound. And over the last couple of years, we have cooperated with Brentwood very carefully to make sure that we are doing everything that we can do to help them in their project. And that has included agreeing to modify boundary lines. We have given some land that is Webster Groves land that was otherwise unused to Brentwood to include in their project itself. And we have done everything that we can to cooperate in that regard. Over the last year, Brentwood has purchased a couple of different properties that are actually on the other side of that boundary and are actually properties that are within the Webster Groves boundary. And so as a consequence, because it has been purchased by the city of Brentwood, it is no longer on our tax rolls. We weren't notified of what was going on. We weren't consulted regarding what was going on, but recently we were told that they had in fact purchased these properties and were requesting that we move the boundary line yet again. I am recommending that we not move the boundary line. There's no need to. There's no purpose. There's nothing manifest about that. We're not mandated to do that. They have come forward and asked that this be done. They've also suggested that we might, in our beneficence, want to also just give them the rest of that area of the Breckenridge industrial area to Brentwood, and suggested that perhaps they could service it better than we do. We, of course, know that's not true, but it is kind of a peculiar suggestion, and I make you aware of it in case you have any questions. There's not anything formally before you. There's not a written request. There has been a conversation that we have had with some members of Brentwood, but beyond that, there's nothing formally before you. I simply wanted to make you aware of it, but I would certainly recommend that you take no action regarding the boundary requests at this time. Can I answer any questions for anyone?
Yeah, Neil, what's the tax implication or what's the revenue implication of moving that boundary on their behalf?
It would be substantial. It would be, Mara had actually pulled up the numbers. Mara, you don't have those numbers per chance, do you?
Here she comes.
I can look for them while you keep talking.
Okay, all right. So it was substantial. It was somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 in terms of tax revenues to Webster Groves. And I will tell you that none of the property owners in that area have come forward and said, you know, we would really like to be part of Brentwood, and not a single one. And they're aware of this because Brentwood has been niggling at the edges of the boundary here. And they're certainly aware of Brentwood's interest in that. So in fact, the property owners have come to us and said, we don't want to be part of Brentwood. And we have had lots of conversations over the last 18 months, 2 years regarding Brentwood's efforts to extend their boundaries and frankly, to take some property that is Webster Groves property.
So Neil, what would they do? Would they just have to declare eminent domain and come and take our property?
They can't, because we are a contiguous municipal entity and we have the same rights they do. They cannot use eminent domain to cross our lines. And so at this point, they own the property and they can use the property. They can use it as they need to. As I say, the boundary really doesn't make a difference. It's their property and they have access to their property. So again, legally, it makes absolutely no difference one way or another.
But Neil, so is it the case that because as owners of that property, because the owners are a municipality, then the tax revenue of that property then cannot be retained by Webster, is it?
Yes, so if they've bought a plot of land and they now own that plot of land because they are a governmental entity, they have the same sovereignty that we do as a city, we cannot tax them. So again, as to the ones that they own, that they are now off our tax rolls. But the other ones that they were asking for in terms of the give, Mara, were you able to find those numbers?
I was able to find the numbers. So the total taxes paid in 2020 for all the properties was $204,000. If you subtract out the 4 that are now going to be tax exempt, the 4 are about 19,000, another, let's see, 1929, 37 plus another 8. So about 45,000 of that is already our 4 lots that have been purchased.
And just Mara, just so the listeners understand fully, that's that tax number that you gave is for all local taxes collected, not just for Webster Groves.
You are correct. For all taxes, including school district.
So Neil, is there any idea that the current property owners who Brentwood wants, that they're going to sell to Brentwood?
No, and then again, Brentwood would have no need to buy the other parts of it at this point. Again, they purchased some of the properties along the creek because they needed that for the remediation, for the flooding, and they claimed it was part of their necessary development there. They tried to negotiate easements, but candidly, the landowners in Webster drove a pretty hard bargain, and so they figured it was just cheaper to buy the properties. So they ended up buying the 4. But the larger properties are still intact and are still operating businesses. So there's no way that they can force this issue. They could perhaps seek to move the boundary line. But again, this is a situation where they've simply said, hey, we want you to consent to it. And frankly, there's no need to do that one way or another.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions?
So is there any action we need to take or just no action?
No action. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of it.
Okay. All right. If there is nothing else there, then would someone call for the approval of the consent agenda?
Mayor,
Yes,
I'd like to
Mayor.
call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welsh,
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, we have appointed Paul Bars to the Sustainability Commission this evening, and we are going into an executive closed session, which will be, I believe,
Under sections 1, 2, and 4.
1, 2, and 4. All right, Ms. Arnold.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session regarding number 1, attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri Statute 610.021, open paren 1, close paren 2, real estate, Missouri Statute 610.021, open paren 2, close paren, and 4, negotiated contract, Missouri Statute 610.021, open paren 12, close paren.
Have a second?
Second,
Thank you. Councilmember Smith,
yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welsh,
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
All right, I don't know about you, but we really need to get up and stretch. Some of us have been sitting here for 3 hours, and Katie and Jen have been at this since 8 o'clock this morning, as has Marie. You guys need 5 minutes or so to get up and stretch, find a soda, a cup of coffee, a Snickers bar, I don't know, something that will give you a little bit of energy.
I'm actually going out on my deck for a few minutes.
Emerson, I'll be right over.
Where's Neil?
Rub
He's
it in,
coming.
why don't you, Emerson?
All right, you guys. Thank you all for attending tonight. We are left with only 12 attendees, but we had a pretty hearty group this evening. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back with a closed session in another 5 or 6 minutes.
Emerson, I have one quick question. How are you going to go out on your deck if you don't own property in Webster Grove?
Yeah, that's gonna be tough.